Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 78 of the Former Rationalized Podcast, and I'm your host, Justin Kramer. And this week, man, whoa, crazy stories. This week I have Daniel Gordon on. He has a really interesting career. He started out as a bulk fuel reservist and went from there to, he decided to become an officer, went to, OCS, TBS, became a artillery officer in 0802, got attached to an infantry unit for deployment, and through that, somehow got his way into IOC, the Infantry Officers Course. So he ended up going through Infantry Officers Course, and then, going into Iraq and to Mosul during the invasion with the 26th MU. He was up in Mosul, and he was in charge of the weapons platoon as a lieutenant. And then he comes back from that, and they don't even make him go through the school this time. He becomes a ground intelligence officer because he's already done IOC and he's already been doing intel work. So then he becomes a ground intelligence officer to get himself into Recon. And, it's just one of these things. Like, literally when I first read his resume that he sent me, I was like, this dude's got to be like a stolen valor guy. Like, this can't be real. But I mean, it's crazy. It's interesting. What an interesting conversation. Like I said, he talks about his time and training coming up through these different MOSs and how he worked, one into another, and why he went one way instead of the other, why he kind of moved away from the artillery community into the infantry world. And just a great conversation. You don't really hear too many people talk about, the invasion of being up in Mosul. That was like a different part of the war. It was the northern part of the war. It's not as popular because the main force was coming from the south and stuff like that. So it's interesting talking about how they heloed in and the work they did in Mosul and getting in some firefights and stuff like that up there. Great conversation. I really appreciate him coming on. We did not get through his entire career because he's done too much. So we're definitely going to be doing a second, if not third episode where he talks about, his time in Recon and all this other stuff. But here we're talking about over the horizon navigation, because he was with boat company and, different stuff that he did like that, and how they almost, some of them almost got killed doing a boat raid or a boat, mission in Liberia while they were on the MU, and them with SEAL Team 4. So really interesting conversation. I'm really glad he came on and was telling this story. So, all right. Hope you guys enjoy that. I did get a review over on Apple Podcasts, so I want to read that off real quick. Let me pull it up. And this is from Andrew.Rose711. He said, I've enjoyed many of these episodes, but it's always great to listen to one with a friend I served with, Greg Wraith. Great interviewers, and currently looking for some Apache pilots for the guys to interview. I look forward to every podcast. Yeah, I reached out to one of the Apache pilots over in the Army, and there's one that is on a training operation right now. He's out, I think, at NTC or one of those, or JRTC. Could be, I can't remember which one exactly, but he's going to hit me up once they get back, and hopefully we can get a Apache pilot on here to kind of talk through what it's like to do that, how to become one, and, the reality versus the perspective. So we'll see how that turns out. Definitely having that in the future, though. I also received a second written review on Apple Podcasts. Again, Apple Podcasts is the only platform that's allowing written reviews, other than the comments on YouTube. Obviously, feel free to leave comments on YouTube. I'll reply to every one of them, or if it's not to me, if it's maybe it's to the guest. If you leave a comment there, I will reach out to that guest to have them come on and reply if you're asking them a specific question that they should answer. So please do that as well. But if you're on Apple Podcasts, like I said, this is the only ones that you can leave a review. So please do so. Received another one from Power. Says, thank you. Really cool how you're giving individuals this platform to share their experiences and provide a record for family and friends. I was a radio operator with Mike Garcia's liaison section with Tango 510 from 93 to 96, and we remain close friends. Hope you do an interview number 2 with him. Keep up the great work, Justin. Actually, I am going to do another interview with him. He was going to be on later today. I was going to do a second interview today with him, but I think he's got some family in town or something like that. So we're actually going to schedule it for tomorrow. Those that are listening, I'm recording this on September 27th, the Sunday. So his interview we're recording tomorrow. Expect that to come out Wednesday or Thursday this week if we do indeed get that interview done tomorrow. But thank you for the review. Thank you, everybody that has left a review on there. I'm at 84 straight 5-star reviews on Apple Podcast. You don't know how much that actually helps out the show. It helps it pushes it in front of other people and increase the visibility. So thank you very much for that. yeah, as always, make sure to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, wherever you're getting your Google Podcast. It's weird. I stopped promoting the podcast for Google Play because Google Play is switching from Google Play to YouTube Music and all this other stuff. But it would never update for some reason. It would take like 3 or 4 days after I posted the podcast for it to actually appear. Google Podcast is probably the quickest updating podcast platform now. I'll upload a podcast and within minutes it pops up there. So, I haven't really promoted them, but that is another option, and it does come out quicker that way. But either way, if you're not subscribed, you're not getting those notifications, so make sure to do that. As always, make sure to check out my Instagram page at Former Action Guys and at J Kramer Graphics, and hit me up on my website at jkramergraphics.com. And I guess that's it. Well, enjoy the show. Yeah, man. Do you have any questions or anything?
No, I mean, I listened to a couple of your shows.
Yeah, yeah.
It is. Had to vet you a little bit too, because
I get it, man.
I don't like to. Probably first interview I've done with any of this stuff. I don't really talk a lot about my stuff. So if it wouldn't have been for my buddy Ace, I probably wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, no, really, I appreciate him introducing us to stuff like that. He said he worked with a lot of guys that would have done a lot of cool stuff and would be good for the podcast. And no, it's totally cool that you you vetted me by checking it out. I totally get it, and
I'm cynical when it comes to this kind of stuff. Everybody gets out and was former Recon or SF or SEALs, and so
yeah.
I get hesitant when I talk to former vets because after a 3-minute conversation, I realize they're full of shit.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty straightforward, man. I always tell guys, I'm like, I got to do some cool stuff while I was in, but everybody there's always someone that's done more than you, and there's always somebody that's done less than you, and there's and there's all these people that can't, they just can't get over that, and they feel like they need to embellish and shit like that. And yeah, I'm just a regular dude, man. I did 5 deployments, but 2 of them were on a MEU. One of them was to Iraq in 2009 when I was a mechanic and stuff like that. So, those weren't anything crazy. And then my other 2 to Afghanistan were more exciting. But, I get it though. I appreciate you vetting me. I actually ask usually when I have people on, if it's someone I don't know personally and they're from a community like Recon or something like that, I usually reach out and be like, hey, is this dude legit? Just the same thing. Because for me, I'd hate to have someone come on making a lot of claims and then turn around and not be who they said they were. That would just be one, embarrassing for me as a podcast host and stuff like that. So I totally get it. I was looking over your, you sent me a kind of a breakdown of your career and stuff. You did a whole lot of stuff. You did a whole lot of just a little bit of everything. So it says you enlisted in 1994. Where are you from, and why'd you decide to join the Marine Corps and enlist at that time?
I'm from Bakersfield, California.
Okay.
And I enlisted because of I was in a junior Marine Corps ROTC program in high school. So
okay.
It was a Marine Corps ROTC program. Joined that. Did that for 4 years, and pretty much my destiny was set. I actually wanted to be a pilot in the Air Force.
Yeah.
What I was thinking. And then by my junior year of ROTC, I was dead set going in the Marine Corps. So
yeah.
If you know anything about Bakersfield, it's like a little piece of Texas or Oklahoma plopped down in the middle of California.
Okay. Yeah, I've never really spent too much time in Bakersfield. I have a buddy who's a police officer up there right now, and he says it's kind of exciting being a police officer there sometimes. But
yeah, I work in law enforcement too. I'm a state parole agent. So
oh, okay. So yeah, you see the end state of all that. It's funny. When I was a kid, I wanted to be an ROTC in high school. I was all about the military. My dad was in the Army and stuff. I watched him go to the Gulf War and come back. So I was like, this little impressionable kid. And the high school that my brother went to, because I originally lived in Chattanooga, Tennessee, he had ROTC. And I remember they had a shooting team and stuff. And I was like, man, that's super cool. I was still in middle school and stuff. And then right before I started high school, I moved up to Indiana, to Lafayette, Indiana. And the high school there didn't have ROTC, and I was bummed about it. I was like, this sucks. I can't believe they don't have ROTC here. What is this, America? Is this not America anymore? Why don't we have ROTC here, And, but in hindsight, I look back and I'm like, God, I would have been such a goob. I would have been that weird goob military kid that was walking the halls of high school and stuff like that. What kind of stuff did you do in high school ROTC to like? I know we all make fun of it and stuff like that, but that's just because those guys haven't, they have a good. I don't know. They have. It's all good, they're all doing a good thing. They just don't realize that they haven't made it yet. Some of them get a little too wrapped around being ROTC. So what was like ROTC for you like in high school?
In some ways, when I became enlisted, I felt like I had more power in ROTC than I did as an enlisted Marine.
Yeah.
It was kind of funny. I'd say for our high school, ROTC was big in the town. We had an Air Force ROTC and a Marine Corps ROTC. We were one of the nationally ranked Marine Corps ROTC programs in the nation. I mean, we had a lot of drill. We actually had a rifle, a small rifle range underneath the cafeteria.
Yeah.
So we had airsoft, but we also had 22s, and they actually taught marksmanship underneath that cafeteria. And it was open to regular kids, the marksmanship class was, but also it was a class for the ROTC kids.
Okay.
But we had, the senior class president was in ROTC, quarterback of the football team was in ROTC. I mean, you had the gambit and spectrum of kids that was in it. It was really big. Every summer we did a annual training, so to speak, almost like the reserves do. We went to 29 Palms, or we went to Hawaii, or we went to Camp Pendleton and did stuff. So it was a really good exposure for the kids here. Every Thursday we wore our uniforms and we had to inspect. Our days were drill, shining boots, and ironing our uniform back in the days when they did that. So
yeah.
It was a good indoctrination, and all the Full Metal Jackets over and over again, watching that show. And
yeah, you got
like
to.
I said, it indoctrinated me to the Marine Corps, and I would say most of my close friends that I'm in contact with now are all my buddies from ROTC, and most of them went into the Marines.
That's cool. That's cool. I've talked about it on the show a couple times, how like because we don't have a draft or anything like that, a lot of kids don't have any kind of exposure to the military. They may have like a distant relative or something that's in the military. So it almost becomes a harder choice for them to join the military because they don't really actually understand what the military is all about and stuff. And I think a program like that is an excellent way to give someone kind of a taste of it and of the expectations. Obviously, it's way more lax than the actual military, but you don't want to. You're not going to yell at a 14-year-old kid like you are a kid that's at Paris Island. You know what I'm saying? It's like completely different, but it gives them that taste and that kind of understanding. So they have a better idea of what they're getting themselves into, because I think a lot of people join the military not realizing that the government owns you, for the next 4 years. It doesn't matter what you think. Like, you're going to stand in line here. You're going to say, you're going to do what I tell you to do. And it's a hard concept for some people to wrap their mind around. And I was lucky. Like I said, I was military family. My dad was in the Army. Both my grandparents or grandfathers served in the military. And I think I have like an uncle in the Navy and, a couple other uncles in the Army and stuff like that. But yeah, man, it's a good thing. It's funny that you talked about having a shooting range in the basement or underneath the cafeteria. Do you know if they still do that? Is that still a thing there?
No.
Yeah.
No, I think after 9/11, not after 9, after what do you call the shooting?
Columbine. Which one?
Columbine. Yeah, Columbine. Yeah, that kind of the catalyst of all the high school shootings. Columbine. I think once that happened, the school said, "Oh, no more. We're taking this out. No more shooting." So that was kind of the downfall. They stopped the shooting. No shooting. At first, they did it only if you were in ROTC, you could do the shooting range. And then they took away the shooting range altogether, said that's too big of a liability on the high school. And actually now that Marine Corps Junior ROTC program, it no longer exists. It completely went away.
See, that's a horrible thing, man. That's like that exposure.
It had been around I think it had been around since like the 30s or 40s. It had been a long program.
Yeah. It's horrible to see the politicalization, I guess, of something like that where, I hate seeing on TV and stuff like that where people talk about like the military. They talk about military and they talk about military recruiters as like they're predators, seeking out misinformed or uninformed youth, to try to trick them into joining and stuff like that. And there is some of that. Let's be honest. There's some shitty recruiters out there that are out there just trying to get their quota so they don't get kicked off recruiting duty. But there's a lot of honest people, and I think the good things about the military are just not known about. You know what I'm saying? There's so many people that don't realize that it's not just poor people that join the military. It's not just like people that couldn't get into a college that join the military. I remember one of my first platoon sergeants had a bachelor's in electrical engineering, and he decided he was bored. He got out of college, got a job and was like, this sucks. I'm bored. There's a war going on right now. What am I doing? And joined the Marine Corps Infantry as an enlisted guy. And it's just the whole spectrum of people that are in the military. And I think taking away a program like that kind of dilutes the program, and it's just not good. It's just not good because I think, like I said before, more people need to understand what the military is actually like. It's not all war fighting. You know, that's another thing I get in these debates online about people, or with people that talk about, like, you know, the military, all they do is go over and start wars and kill people. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, we sent people to Haiti after the earthquake to help them. We sent 2 ships, one to one to LA and one to New York for the whole COVID-19 thing. We've sent, you know, people to Nepal after, you know, devastation that they've had there. We actually lost a crew, a Marine helicopter crew, you know, out there doing work. And it's like, I wish people understood more of what the military did and stuff like that. So that's a good program for that.
It brings a lot of people together that normally would not be together on the spectrum. I mean,
for sure.
I was a lower socioeconomic class person going in the military.
Me too.
Cliche story. Yeah. Didn't understand my ways through college or how to get there. So I'm like, hey, I'll go in the Marine Corps, get the JIB, and go to college. Mm-hmm. But you're saying, you know, you're a platoon sergeant. I had guys in my platoon that had I had a guy in my platoon, didn't realize till he was in my platoon for like a year. He was my corpsman. He had a degree. He went to Princeton.
Oh, wow.
And I thought it was a joke. And they're like, no, Doc went to Princeton, sir. I'm like, you went to Princeton, Doc? Oh, yeah, my whole family did everything. Same thing. He actually wanted to join Special Forces. I think he went in to become a Navy SEAL, but then wound up becoming a SARC.
Yeah.
Special Operations Reconnaissance Corpsman. So.
Which is legit as fuck. You know, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then the one last thing about school, like shooting stuff. It's funny, in middle school, when I lived in Tennessee, you could take hunter education as one of your, like, middle school is where they first kind of give you an opportunity to take a class that you want to pick. Hunter education was one of the courses that you could take at my middle school in Tennessee. And if you graduated the class at the end of the semester, they took you out to the football field. They shot clay pigeons they brought shotguns out and shot clay pigeons. And I was like, man, there is no way that would happen.
No
like,
way.
even at the time, I thought that was kind of crazy. But now there's like no way that something like that would happen. But
there'd be in the rifle range in my class, there'd be 20 kids sitting around with 22s just holding them. We had the old Marine Corps shooting jackets.
Yeah.
The old Marine
the
Corps
canvas
rifles.
ones. Yeah.
Yeah, we had all that stuff. But there'd be like 20 kids sitting around with rifles just holding them. We never had an accident. You know, the sergeant major that ran it, you know, he took it all real serious, and the kids took it serious. If you treat people like they don't know what they're doing, they're going to act that way. If you treat them, teach them, they're going to act appropriately. And I think that happened a lot there.
Having someone come in and teach at a younger age, like middle school, high school even, and show the seriousness of weapons handling and stuff like that, and that it's not a toy and it's not a game, you know, and how could you do it better? Instead of having people that are trained and understand how to, let's say I've never been introduced to a firearm and I see one, I walk into a room and there's one sitting there. I don't even know how to put it on safe or make sure it's safe or unload it. You know, now I'm just afraid to even be around it rather than understanding the tool and disarming it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, it's a weird way to look at it, but I don't want to get all caught up on guns and stuff like that. So you joined in 1996, right? And
94.
94, sorry. Let me pull this back up. So you joined in 1994. It says you had like multiple MOSs here. What was your actual MOS that you enlisted with?
My primary MOS I enlisted with was 1391, bulk fuel specialist.
Okay.
That was the reserve unit that was in my town. And then all the other MOSs were secondary MOSs I did while I was enlisted in the reserves here.
Okay. What reserve unit were you with?
I was with 6th Engineer Support Battalion.
Okay.
6th ESB.
How'd you like, bulk fuel specialist? It's funny because that's like the joke MOS, you know, it's like one of the joke ones, like, oh, he went to be bulk fuel, you know, like, ha ha ha. How'd you like being a bulk fuel guy? And you were in the reserves, so how'd you like doing that in the reserves?
You know, it's with reserves, if you're in your town, you're kind of subject to what the MOSs that are in your community. So that was just what was happening here.
Yeah.
Is we have a big oil and agriculture business in Kern County. Mm-hmm. So since we have so much oil here, Chevron's big, Arid, Texaco, all that stuff's been big here. Just bulk fuel kind of landed here. Back in the 40s or something, 50s, it used to be like a grace platoon where they would recover dead bodies, but then it switched over to bulk fuel sometime later. Bulk fuel was good. Like I said, it gave me a lot of opportunities. I lived in town. I went to a lot of those secondary MOS schools because I was one of the lucky ones that could, you know, jump in if they needed somebody to go, like I said, NBC school, PMI school, They have a naval gunfire spotter class I went to. So I just kind of ate up everything I could, and it allowed me to go to college, but be a Marine and kind of get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I saw.
But it's funny having that cliche MOS, because we go back to the Recon community, and that's what Recon, so no one kind of bothers them, always says that they're we're bulk fuel, we're pumping gas, kicking ass. I would talk legit bulk fuel when people would ask me that, like, oh, maybe he is a bulk fuel.
He is
like,
bulk fuel. You're like,
I
yeah, the weights and measurements.
I got a funny story about OCS. I went to OCS, and I was with a prior enlisted guy. We all got to stand up and say our MOSs when we first get there. And you stand up, say your name, where your college you're from, and I said I was a bulk fueler. And then the guy right next to me is prior enlisted. He stands up, says he's a bulk fueler. And I'm like, all right, cool, I made another bulk fueler. And then after it kind of gets past us, he kind of leans over, whispers, he's like, hey, how long you been a Recon? I was like, what? I'm like, I'm a bulk fueler. He's like, no shit, I've never met a bulk fueler. He was legit Recon and said he was bulk fueler.
He's like, oh, I thought we all just said that as like a code word.
Exactly.
That's funny. What was your naval gunfire schooling like? Because I was a forward. I mean, you said you've listened to the podcast a few times. I was a forward observer and did naval gunfire out at EWTG PAC and out at San Clemente Island, the school there. What kind of training did they put you guys through?
We had we had a couple of our guys go down to 3rd Anglico from where we were at in Bakersfield. And my goal was to try to get down to 3rd Anglico too. So we had a major that came back from 3rd Anglico to come up to be an I&I instructor. And he just brought up the naval gunfire spotter course. And they actually brought up like a whole projector screen set up. And we actually did it back in those days kind of virtually. Mm-hmm. They had the class. It was just a naval gunfire class. And he was the one that kind of brought that up to us. It wasn't any artillery, no air, just straight naval gunfire class. That we had an Anglico guy that actually brought that up, and they just allowed like 10 or 12 guys to get that designation, get that certificate. My hopes was either to transfer down to Anglico. I was actually trying to lap move the comm, because they wanted comm guys down in Anglico. Because when I enlisted, my whole goal was to either go Anglico or Recon. That was my whole goal.
And why was that?
Just looking in ROTC and looking in ROTC, and then finally getting in the Marine Corps, you kind of look at what my desires were to be more, I don't know, combat oriented, the fun stuff. I wanted to jump out of planes. I want to call in airstrikes. I wanted to sneak around, Okinawa or Korea jungle warfare kind of stuff. Just the kid stuff. If I grew up watching Rambo and First Blood and Chuck Norris and all that kind of stuff. And as cliche as that stuff sounds, that's what I wanted to do.
Hey, man, that kind of stuff drew a lot of people into the military. And it's funny how many people were disappointed by the reality that, like, it's not all cool stuff. It's like 1.1% cool stuff, and the rest of it's like, getting ready to do the cool stuff.
We glorify the 10% of fun and forget about the 90% of bullshit.
For sure. And it's funny now, like, I'll see commercials of guys, like, I'll see like a commercial show some like Recon guys coming up out of the water and stuff, and I'm like, those dudes are miserable. Like, that dude's probably pissed in his wetsuit. Like, that they make it all look super cool, but in reality, it's like those dudes that are doing it are bitching about it the entire time. Like, this fucking sucks.
When you talk about the times you bitch about and complain about and miserable about, that's the time you talk about.
Yeah,
you never talk about, remember that one mission where everything went right and nothing went wrong? That's not what you talk about. You talk about the crazy stuff when you're miserable.
Yeah, shared misery is the basis of a lot of stories in the military. Naval gunfire actually, they're moving it from Coronado to Fort Sill. They're combining it with the artillery corps, so it's actually going to be all virtual. The naval gunfire is going to be all virtual now anyways. I guess they were having a issue getting boats on station to come in and support the class. So not every class was able to get, they would fly them out to San Clemente Island, which is like the big island for doing shoots and stuff out there. And they weren't getting call for fires done. So they were like, why are we spending the money to fly these dudes out here or plan all this stuff and keep guys in Coronado, California, when half the time they're not even getting to utilize the actual ship. So I think someone in the budgetary areas, made the call to just cank the naval gunfire like school there in Coronado and move it to Fort Sill. So it's now everybody's doing it virtual. Gunfire
at San Clemente, but I got to go to Puerto Rico at Vieques and do naval gunfire when I was a FIST team leader. I got to spend a couple weeks there we did so much naval gunfire, it was unreal.
Yeah.
It was just ship after ship.
I've heard that was the spot back in the day. Like that, they did a lot of cast trips there. They did a lot of naval gunfire stuff there. And then wasn't there like Didn't an aircraft accidentally drop on like a civilian building or something like that? And then that's when they closed the bombing range down there?
It might have been after my time. I know there was a small little like town in Vieques and stuff because you had to come over from like Rosie Roads from the naval base to kind of do all that. But when I was there, I don't think that had happened yet.
Yeah.
It could have, but they didn't tell us about it.
Yeah.
But I know it's closed down now.
Yeah, for sure. I that's one of the places I had read about. I was hoping to be able to visit while I was in, but never had the opportunity because of that. So at what point did you decide to leave the reserves and go to the officer route?
That was actually always my goal, was to go to become an officer, because like I said, I want to be a pilot in the Air Force originally. But I said, hey, I'll go over to the Marine Corps and do it. I enlisted, and then I went to OCS with a flight contract. I had a flight contract to be a pilot, and so I went my senior year to OCS, came back, and when you get back from OCS, they give you like 10 hours of flight time.
Okay.
And so I was doing like 10 hours of flight time. Matter of fact, there was a Prowler pilot that was in my reserve unit, and went up with him a couple times stuff. Man, I just got sicker than a dog. I hated it. I hated every minute of the flying. I did not like it. So
Really?
it was good exposure. So I actually went to OCS, and you got to stand in formation and say, Canada Gordon, Cal State University, Bakersfield, air. And if you're a ground contractor, you just say, Canada Gordon, Cal State University, Bakersfield, ground. So all my peers knew me as an air contract. So I went in to do air, and then I actually turned it down my senior year. Talked to my officer selection officer, said, "Nah, I don't want to do air. I want to go ground," and switched over to a ground contract and went back to the basic school as a ground contract. So I mean, I'd always had the goal to be an officer, to kind of go in to be a pilot. But then when I realized that's not what I wanted to do, I said, I'll switch over to go ground.
Yeah, you're one of the few Mustangs I've had on. Can you talk about the differences that you saw between boot camp and I'm assuming you went to MCRD San Diego?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I went to San Diego.
Can you kind of talk through some of the difference between that? Obviously, the training is different now, where it's 2020, so it's so many different things have happened on the depots that have changed training. So I'm sure it's different, but I'm sure you have like a cool perspective of the differences there.
I listened to the one podcast you had with the major that was on, the infantry major and stuff, and listened to his stories of OCS, which is very similar. But it is nice to have that take with prior service, going to boot camp and then going to OCS. The one thing I liked, the difference between boot camp and OCS is at boot camp, they break you down, but then they build you back up. They build you back up, and man, you could take a private and send him to North Korea, and he feels like he could take on the whole country by himself. OCS doesn't do that. OCS just breaks you down and sends you away. And I think they do that to have an attrition rate, because they only need one officer for every 10 Marines. At least that's what it was when I was in. So they don't need a lot of the Marine officers that that the enlisted side may need. So at OCS, it's really just a rite of passage. Let me break you down and send you away. I had a guy that was a JAG option, and he came in. And on your one thing that's interesting about OCS when I was there is on your 7th week, you can DOR. You can drop on request. You can just leave. It's not for me. And I remember talking to this JAG option. He's like, I don't like this. I don't like being yelled at. I don't like people telling me what to do. I'm like, you're going to be an officer. It's completely different. He's like, nope, I'm going home. I'm done. So OCS, I will say this. People ask me what's harder, OCS or boot camp. And I think I dovetail that in two directions. OCS is physically harder to me because I think they can have a higher attrition rate. But going through boot camp twice is good and bad, because all the games that are going to happen, the games are going to play. But at the same time, what's coming. Like, oh, I don't want to do this again. No one wants to go through boot camp twice. Yeah. But they lean on the priors heavy at OCS, like your drill instructors, which I think they call them staff sergeants or sergeant instructors.
Sergeant instructors, yeah.
They're like, hey, if you got to shine your boots, get with the priors. If you got to iron your uniform, get with your priors. So all they hear is get with the priors, and they lean on us heavily to kind of teach a lot of stuff.
Really?
But one thing I noticed about OCS is all us prior enlisted guys, we were all the ones that were broke down early. Like I guess after so many years in the Marine Corps beating up our bodies, it just took a toll on our bodies. I had a staff sergeant that got up every day. Prior staff sergeant, he had shin splints, and he actually had stress fractures that were really bad. He was taping up his legs every day. I hurt my knee at OCS. All the priors, we just broke down. We just broke down over there.
Yeah, it's tough, man. That's going through boot camp twice. What a decision. I've had a few buddies do it, and that's
why I went. they allow you to do a junior between your sophomore junior year,
Mm-hmm.
and then go back again a second time between junior and senior. Me going through boot camp, I knew I wanted to do it once.
Yeah.
So then when they said, "Hey, what do you want to do?" I go, "I want to go the 10-week course between my junior and senior year. That's
Yeah.
it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it twice," because they had a prior service guy that was in our class. He tore both his triceps the year prior.
Oh
He
my
tore both his
God.
triceps, and I was like, "Nah, that's why I'm glad I did this once."
Yeah.
But I mean, OCS is really it's nice, but I felt a bigger sense of accomplishment after boot camp than OCS, because you still have to go to the basic school as an officer. So OCS was kind of like a rite of passage. I'm glad I went there. I have a lot of friends. I had some prior service friends. I met one of my best friends who's a retired major in the Marine Corps. He went to OCS with me, but we met at NBC school. So he was a corporal, I was a sergeant. We met at NBC school, kept in touch. He was from Florida, but me and him went to OCS together. So you still have built that camaraderie, but I kind of built it more with a lot of the guys I'd already known that were going, other enlisted personnel that were going to OCS.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense, man. And I can see how you could say that going to boot camp or finishing boot camp was more prideful. I mean, plus it's, going through OCS, you've already earned the title Marine. So I guess I could see how that wouldn't be as like, okay, you're probably just glad to be done. Like, Jesus, glad I got done with that again. Not again. I'm not going to go through another boot camp.
EGAs back in the day, you had the EGAs you ironed on your breast pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you could always tell the prior service from the officer candidates that came from just college, because we had the EGAs on our uniform, but we couldn't wear a rank.
Okay.
So they would mess with us, be like, "You need to take that EGA off. You haven't rated it yet." And I'm like, "Well, I'm a sergeant in the Marine Corps, staff sergeant. You don't rate it. I don't want to see that on again." But they weren't really expecting us to take off an iron on. They're just like, "Hey."
Yeah.
That was a way to tell the difference between now how they have everyone has it kind of embroidered on.
Yeah.
They could always tell, "Those are your prior service. You guys got that USMC ironed on your uniform."
Yeah, I remember in boot camp we got crap from our drill instructors about that. Actually, they're like, "These are on your uniforms, but you haven't fucking earned them yet." Blah 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 blah. Just yelling at us about it, just being mad, just to be mad. That's that boot camp life. Yeah, dude. I had a major ask me if I ever considered coming over to be an officer when I was at 10th Marines, and I'm like, dude, no. Like I get it. I think there's goods and bad to it. Like, I just don't like, one, I didn't want to go back through boot camp again. I was like, fuck that.
Right.
Like, cause I went to Paris Island, and I remember being done and not really believing that it was done. Cause it just felt like it was never going to end. Like, it was like, this is never going to fucking stop. Like, this is it now, and I'm just sitting here, and I was messed up, man. I was messed up for at least a week after boot camp. I was doing stupid shit. I was like tucking my shirt into my like gym shorts, walking around my house and stuff. Like, what am I doing? Like
I wore my alphas all the way home from boot camp.
Oh, really?
Like my family's like, "Hey, we're at Burger King. You get change." I'm like, "Nope." My first sergeant told me to wear them home. I wore them all the way home, like 2 hours from San Diego, or 4 hours from San Diego to Bakersfield, in my alphas. I think I sat at attention in the car the whole time too.
That's funny, man. You're so brainwashed out of boot camp. I remember sitting in a movie. I got out of boot camp, and that movie 9/11 had just come out, the one with Nicolas Cage. And I was like, I want to go see this movie. So me and one of my buddies went to go see it. And I remember sitting there watching the movie, and my neck started itching. And I'm like, my fucking neck itches. And for like 10 minutes, I couldn't even focus on the movie. I was thinking about my neck itching. Then I'm like, wait, I can scratch my neck. Like, what am I doing?
Yes.
I'm so messed up in the head. Yeah, man, that's good times. So when you finished up OCS, you obviously don't, at this point, you gave up your air contract, so you don't really know what your MOS is going to be. What were you hoping for at that time?
I was hoping to get infantry. I wanted all the combat arms first. Infantry was first, artillery second. I remember my exact breakdown. It was infantry, artillery, tanks, tracks. That was it. After that, I didn't care. I was like, almost all your prior service guys, they almost all come in wanting to go combat arms. I don't know why or what it is, regardless of their background, MOS. Prior service, well, I take that back. Prior service guys are usually combat arms guys or flight contracts. That's the bulk of them. So I spent a year back going to college, waiting to go to the basic school. But then that was the big shocker, as I showed up to the basic school as a ground contract, and all my peers were like, "You had a flight contract? You turned it down?" I'm like, "Yeah, man, I didn't like flying." And my roommate was an air contract, and he messed with me the whole time at the basic school. And he almost got me good, because there's you do a straw poll where you pick your MOS, but you don't get to pick your MOS at the basic school. You just hope you get high enough scores to get one of your top 4 picks.
Yep.
And a fake list came out like right towards 3/4 of the way through the basic school, and he put it together one night on our officer fire watch kind of a thing at night. And I got no offense to anyone that's ground supply, but he gave me ground supply as an officer. And then he goes, man, I saw the SPC, the staff platoon commander. He goes, I was looking around the office and he had a list came out, and I snagged it. Look at this. And it showed, he did it for everyone. He messed with everyone. And it showed that I got ground supply, and I was devastated. I was devastated. And I was like, for the next week, I was kind of flippant and arrogant, even to the captain.
Oh,
because I was like, I don't care. I got supply. I'm going to be a box kicker. No offense. But for me, it was torture. I'm like, I'm going to spend 4 years. I gave up a flight contract to go be a supply O. And then finally, like, we were in a field doing effects, and he goes, Daniel, you did not get supply. I don't know what you got. I'm messing with you. You're going to mess up and get like bad leadership grades if you don't start acting right. I'm like, that's not a lie. I didn't get ground supply. He's like, no, you didn't get ground supply. I go, don't mess with me. He's like, no, you didn't. I'm like, okay. So I had to turn my mind around and realize, okay, I didn't get ground supply. It's still an option for me.
Yeah, that's funny. And yeah, no offense to all the ground supply people. There's a lot of guys, so I think people don't understand that they do like I don't know if they did it at that time, but they do now the top third, middle third, bottom third,
Yes.
Okay. So
they still did it that way with the thirds, and almost all your prior service guys are in the top third. And it's not because we're better than the other guys. It's just, you have guys that come from, how many years. We had a gunnery sergeant that had, 15 years of experience as an officer. It's just all the military skills, the leadership, it's just embedded in them. And we take charge. We're the first billet holders as prior service. Like, I remember I think I was the first sergeant of my TBS class and everything. So it's just all of the prior service guys wind up getting those billets first. And it's kind of like they got a jump start on some of the guys. But it's not to speak any less to the other guys. It's just they don't know. But they still break it to those top thirds, man. And some people are like, well, maybe I'll fail this test, so then I'll be at the top of the second, third, or then because you kind of know your rankings, like, okay, where I'm at. I'm in top third, middle third. But you can't, there's no game in it. You just got to do the best you can and fall where you fall. I hear it's a little different now because the SPCs, when I was in, the staff platoon commanders, which are the captains, they had a lot of influence in your job. And if they felt like you weren't ready, they didn't want you in their community, whether infantry, RD, or whatever, you did not get their community. We had a prior staff sergeant, and a matter of fact, he was an Anglico guy. He's a comm guy, Gelazella. And he was he was super smart, but he always had this attitude. I don't care what MOS I get, whatever MOS I get. And he got adjutant, he got admin, and he really wanted combat arms. And the SPC kind of did that on purpose because he kept saying, what do you want, Galzella? I don't care, whatever I get. He was in the top third. I think he might have been in the top 5%.
Oh, man.
Which means you get an automatic augmentation. Like, you get augmented. I talked to that later as an officer, but he got his automatic augmentation, but they gave him adjutant. And I was like, man, I told him, you were playing with fire there, because the SPC said, oh, you don't care? I'll show you. You get admin.
Yeah, that sucks. That's what a bummer, man. That's a really tough. I mean, hey, some people want to do those jobs. Like I said, like we talked about in the beginning, the military has so many different jobs. Like, there's hundreds of jobs. There's literally one, rifleman job. And there's hundreds of other jobs. Like, so someone's got to be the adj, someone's got to be the suppo, some people want to do that, but some people don't, for sure.
We had officers literally crying that we had to like console that, their dad might've been an infantry officer, or their dad was an artillery guy or something. And they got, low altitude air defense, LAD.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't even know what that is.
Fucking LAD.
Or they got LAD or they got, I had a really good friend of mine I went to OCS with. He wanted infantry so bad. His dad was an infantry officer, and he got MP. And I remember he just was bawling in his room. Like, no one else saw it, but he's like, dude, I go, you can still do stuff as an MP. It's not the end of the world. But you had guys just devastated and crushed because the next 4 years they were going to do a job that they didn't foresee them doing. But conversely, I want to say that even when I was in the infantry, RD, when I was in Recon, and even now, I love the combat support guys. And I used to talk to my my platoon, and regardless of what unit I was in, I would say, hey, what does the supply guys need from us? What does the logistics guys need from us? What does the adjutant? They don't need anything from us.
Mm-hmm.
We need everything from those guys. And I was a super pogue, if you want to say it, enlisted. I was pumping gas, kicking ass. I mean, those guys are just as good at their job doing stuff, but we need everything from them, and they don't need anything from us. During missions, I would take out the RP from the chaplain. He would go out on our platoon missions, or I had a whole section of motor T guys
Mm-hmm.
that were fixing vehicles while the rest of us are returning fire. You're talking about high levels of stress. So I love the combat support guys even more now, because I get out and I go to see someone and I'm like, hey, how you doing? They find out I was a Marine, and I'm like, oh, I was Recon, or oh, I was special forces, but I can't really talk about it. I'm like, of course you were, like every other guy, because there's no combat service support. But when someone goes, man, I was motor T or something, I try to talk to them and pick their brain and thank them. I had a guy that's like, I was just a cook. I'm like, man, that's awesome. Cool shit. I mean, I really appreciate those guys more ever than I think I used to. As a young Marine, you think you're the cock of the walk in some MOSs, but the combat service support guys, honestly, I praise them when they come out and they tell everyone what they did, because their service is no less important than the rest of us.
100%. That's 100% true, man. That's I wish I could get that point across even more. I try to bring it up like I said at the beginning. Some of us have done more in parentheses, like combat stuff or whatever you want to call it, than others, but that doesn't. We've also done way less than other people. So
Right.
there's no reason that I should disparage somebody else because they didn't go and get shot at or something like that, or they had a job that kept them in the States the whole time. It is what it is. I hated being a fucking mechanic. I came in open contract. I wanted to be infantry. And, when I came in, they told me, they're like, hey, dude, you can go infantry, but you got to wait 3 more months. And I had already sold my car and quit my job and moved out of my apartment because I thought I was going to boot camp the next day, and they were like, oh, no. Oh, you thought you were going infantry. Well, that's not available. If you want to do it, you can, but you have to wait 3 months. And I'm like, what? And they're like, well, here's your options. Now that you're down at MEPS and going to boot camp tomorrow, and I ended up going open contract. I became a mechanic, and not just a mechanic in MLG, at maintenance battalion.
Yeah.
And it was just freaking miserable. And, but I'll say there were guys there that loved it. They loved being a mechanic, and they were all about it. And for me though, and so I feel the pain of those officers that didn't get the job they wanted, because even when I found out I was going to be a mechanic, they're like, hey, you're going to be a mechanic. You finish MCT, and they're like, Kramer, 3521, Camp Johnson. I'm like, what? Because I thought I was going to Aberdeen, Maryland at first. So originally I wanted infantry. They said, no, you have to go open contract if you want infantry. They got me that way. And I did it. And like an idiot. And at the end of boot camp, they're like, hey, here's the job you're going to go to. Here, all the open contract people come over here. Kramer, you're going to O2, whatever it is. It's a geographic intelligence specialist. That was my original one. So I'm like, okay. So I get done with boot camp. I'm at home like, oh, I'm going to Aberdeen. The school's this long. This is how long it's going to be. I'm planning ahead. So then I go to MCT, and at the end of MCT, they tell everybody their MOS and where their school is. And they're like, Kramer, 3521, Camp Johnson. I'm like, what the fuck's a 3521? And they're like, it's a motor T mechanic. And I'm like, what? And then I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll get attached to an infantry unit. Maybe I'll be a mechanic in an infantry unit, and I'll get to do some cool stuff still. I get done with my MOS school at Camp Johnson, and the staff sergeant's like, Kramer, so-and-so, 2nd Main Battalion, 2nd MLG. Huh, that's the worst fucking unit in the entire Marine Corps. And I'm like, God damn it. And I was just like, this sucks. But it's one of those things like...
I got a kid right now that trains jiu-jitsu with me, and he's going in the Marine Corps next month.
Yeah.
And rolling around on the mats, he's like, he's going to the Marine Corps. And he's like, my recruiter says he's going to bring me some paperwork because I got to switch over to engineers. I go, what? He goes, yeah. So he's bringing the paperwork today to sign. I go, what's your contract? He goes, aviation mechanic. I'm like, is that what you want? He's like, yeah, I want to work on planes and stuff. So when I get out, I can do something with avionics. I go, tell him that you're not going to boot camp. I tell him the whole spiel, like, don't do this, don't do that. Because I have one of those boot camp stories. I was supposed to go to Anglico, 3rd Anglico. My recruiter was Recon. Came to me, said, hey, those all got, given away. We got to switch your MOS. You'll be able to do your stuff here in Bakersfield, but you're close. You'll be able to switch over once you get out of boot camp. I bought it.
Yeah.
And I got switched. And I go, hey, don't do what all of us do. I go, tell him you're not going to boot camp. Go to boot camp later.
Just
and he
wait,
calls me the next day, and he goes, hey, he said, headquarters found my spot, so I get to go, so thanks. So I kind of saved him from having one of our horror stories or recruiter stories.
For sure. I'm waiting on a phone call. I think it's one of my mom's friends. Her son is supposed to call me because he's going down to talk to the recruiter. And I told her, I was like, yeah, give him my phone number. I don't care. I'm totally all about letting someone know, man. Like, there's no reason why we should let someone get screwed over by a recruiter. Yeah. Like I said, there's plenty of good recruiters out there that do what they're supposed to do, that know, Marine Corps MOSs well enough to speak about them intelligently. And then there's a lot that don't. And then they're going to screw you and try to do something like, you're talking about.
Well, his recruiter is a staff sergeant. He gets out in 3 months. He probably needed an engineer quota, wanted to switch a guy. And this guy was an open contract. And open contract, but he said he was open contract, but he had a verbal agreement for aviation mechanic. I go, what's your ASVAB score? He's like, oh, I got a 75. I'm like, oh, you'll get aviation.
Yeah.
But I told him now, I go, get your contract. And when you go to MEPS, get that paperwork so you have it. Because you don't want to be like, oh, he did switch me.
There's no such thing as a verbal contract. Get that shit on paper.
Exactly.
100%. Yeah, man.
We've been there, done that.
It's tough, though. Like, doing the, 3 years in a job I didn't want to do. I tried to make the best of it. I will say that going into the Marine Corps, being a mechanic in the Marine Corps, made me a better mechanic. I knew how to do basic stuff on my car. I could change my own oil or change my brake pads. But now I feel comfortable. Like, if I needed to, I could remove my transmission or something like that on my own. And I've saved, I had an Evo before that I used to modify all the time. So I've saved thousands of dollars on work that I just did myself. It made me appreciate it way more when I got to 10th Marines as a forward observer, as a scout. And after I did my lap move, and I've told people, like, it was such a weird feeling going over there. Coming from maintenance battalion was like coming from factory work to, the Marine Corps almost. Because even over at maintenance battalion, I've said it 100 times on the podcast, like, you don't get a rifle. They don't even issue a rifle to you. You get a rifle right before you go to the rifle range, and you turn it back in when you're done with the rifle range. And that difference in going over to 10th Marines, checking in, like, here's your rifle. That's my rifle that I'm going to have all the time. And like, hey, we're going to the field next week. And I was just like pumped, I'm like, fuck yeah, we're going to the field. Like, this is cool. This is exciting. And it just made me appreciate, having a cool job and finally making it to where I wanted to be. And, I felt bad. I'd go back over to maintenance battalion to eat lunch with my buddies sometimes. And everyone was just so miserable over there. And it was just like, dude, you guys got to push through this and you can make it, try a different job and stuff like that. So for you, what was it like switching from being a reservist, gas guy, out there bulk fuel, doing your bulk fuel thing, to being a full-time officer, and now you're moving? Or, well, actually, at what point did you figure out what your MOS was going to be? They actually told you. We haven't even talked about that yet.
I think I had a similar experience as I was in the reserves, and I ate up every job I could get. I mean, being a bulk fueler, you're not going to be the proudest guy, so to speak, but I tried to be the best one at it. But that's why I went to every secondary MOS school I could go to. Let me be a PMI. Let me be a primary marksman ship instructor. Let me NBC, Naval Gunfire. Let me just do whatever. I just ate up whatever I could get, so that I almost wanted some other legitimacy amongst Marines, and we went somewhere and did something. And even when I went to the basic school, I graduated the basic school, I was the high shooter. And they had snipers and recon guys and all that kind of stuff. But I really think my ROTC time, marksmanship, and then PMI time, it just, the fundamentals, not to mention having a dad that was a former Navy SEAL shooting my whole life. I just had those fundamentals set as far as shooting. Shooting is like second nature for me.
Oh, okay.
I shot a 7mm Mauser at 5 years old.
Oh, wow.
So
nice. That's awesome.
I still have that gun.
That's cool.
But to not digress and get back to your question, is I went to the basic school, we're competing for our MOSs, and it's very similar to like MCT, except as a reservist, I already knew my job. So I didn't have to sit there and everyone's like, oh, what are you getting? You're going to School of Infantry or whatever. At the basic school is kind of like MCT on steroids, but you got to learn not just field operations, you got to learn Uniform Code of Military Justice, customs and courtesies, leadership, tactical decision games. They really, OCS is a rite of passage. TBS is where you learn how to be an officer. When you get done with OCS, it's not like, oh, you know what the Marine Corps is about. You don't even understand what it means to be a second lieutenant, really. The basic school is where you're built as an officer. So that's what's good, is they give you exposure to everything, so that by the time you're ready to pick a job or an MOS, you kind of like, okay, hey, I want to go this avenue. because you get guys that say they want infantry at the beginning of the basic school, and I was in Arctic Alpha, which is in December when it starts. And after a couple days being in the snow or doing a machine gun flex and your hands are freezing to something or it's sleeting on you, guys like, maybe supply doesn't sound too bad.
Yeah.
So it's kind of good because you get the guys that go their route. But I'm going to tell you, man, all the priors are snake eaters. They're out there. They don't give a shit. They're in the dirt. They're loving it. They know if they have prior MOSs, like, this is what I want.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember there's a big war at the end of TBS. You do a big war, a big final fex, and we're all sitting around. And my SPC was, and they have a straw pool where you get like a fake MOS pool, and you walk in, you get to put like a chit on an MOS that's open, and all the SPCs are standing there. So in the straw pool, I went in, and infantry was open. Like, I think they had like 18 slots. So I'm like, cool. I hang my chit on infantry. So I was assuming I was going to get infantry, but you got to really be happy with your top 4 picks. So my SPC's calling it out, and I was there with my guys in my platoon, and the SPC calls out 0802. And all I had in my mind was 0302. And I was like, what in the fuck is an 0802? I was like, I remember we got on the 5 tons, I think it was back then. I don't even think they had 7 tons yet. We got on the 5 tons, and we're driving back, and I turned to one of the officers, like, what the fuck is 0802? You got 0802, right, Blosser? He's like, artillery. And I'm like, okay, I got my second pick, artillery. All right, cool. I was happy with combat arms, but I didn't get the infantry that I wanted. But I'm like, okay, cool. Anglico is where I'll go. Because I had a mission. Recon or Anglico was where I was going to go. So I was like, okay, I'll head over to Anglico and get into that route.
Why were you so set on going to either Recon or Anglico?
I really wanted to jump out of fucking planes.
That was it, huh?
I wanted to be, in the Marine Corps, I'd always seen the jump wings, the gold wings, and the parachuting. And I had friends in the Army that jumped, and they were Rangers and stuff. And it's like, it takes an act of God to get jump wings in the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to jump, and Marine Corps getting a jump bill, it's like next to none. So Recon and Anglico, I mean, there was an LSB battalion, the Atlantic Sport Battalion guys, the Red Patchers that jumped.
Yeah, those are your actually the parachute packers.
Right.
Yeah, those are the guys that get to jump all the time.
Yeah, the riggers. A matter of fact, here's funny. The riggers go to school at Fort Seal. Not Fort Seal. Fort Lee, which is where bulk fuelers go. So we're with riggers, and we are with bulk fuelers. No shit, true story. My roommate Hida, I went through boot camp with him. He was a rigger. We came that close. He's like, hey, they don't have a jump log or a jump manifest. Come in tomorrow. We'll put a chute on you, and you'll just jump.
No way.
No, I was half a heartbeat. He goes, they don't even know anything. You'll grab your pack, go to the paraloft, and just peel off and go back. And I came that close to just jump. It sounds a funny story, but this is like the late 90s. He had it all set up. We were all going to I was just going to jump out of a plane. No experience. He's like, I know you want to jump. I can get you in.
It's not hard, man. Just jump.
He goes, just land and put your feet together. Who knows what crazy shit would happen.
Oh my God.
But, and they also had, at that school, they had what we called stitch bitches. They had fabric repair guys. Mm-hmm. So I went to the quartermaster school. So they actually had guys that come in, and they were basically seamstress.
Yep.
And they sewed everything in the Marine Corps. So we had seamstress, riggers, and bulk fuelers at my school. So the stitch bitches didn't get no love, unfortunately. They don't have that MOS anymore.
I was going to say, I don't know if they do that anymore or not.
They don't have it anymore, but they have the riggers and the bulk fuelers. So
that's funny. Yeah.
That's why I wanted to go Anglico or Recon, is I really wanted to jump out of planes.
That's cool. Yeah, I get that. I mean, some people are all about that. I had one opportunity where they kind of brought it up. It was like, hey, we might have a spot if you want to take it. And I'm like, am I gonna get jump pay or anything from this? And they're like, no. And I'm like, no.
Yep.
I was in my 30s already. I think I was like 32. I was like, and right. I think I had a bad knee already, and I'm like, I'm not trying to like break my leg just for fun, like come out here and, know. But
they just had a Recon guy die at jump school.
Yeah, man. It happens occasionally. There was one, I think a guy died last year at their free fall school. I think it was last year a guy passed away as well. Is as routine as it has become to go jump out of airplanes down at Fort Benning. I don't think that it's just not routine still. It's still one of those things. Like one of the guys on my team at Anglico, he went, we sent half my team was jump qualified, even though Anglico lost their jump mission. The active duty Anglicos lost their jump mission when they.
Oh, when did that happen?
When they went away in they took away the active duty Anglicos in like the early 2000s, I think, or maybe late 90s, somewhere around that time frame. They went away and they became the MEF liaison element, the MLE.
Yes, I remember that.
Okay, and then when they brought back, they're like, hey, we're reopening first Anglico, second Anglico, and all the active duty Anglicos because the global war on terrorism and all this stuff's coming up. They brought them back, but they didn't have their jump mission anymore. Only the reservists retained their jump mission. So if you want to jump for 100% guarantee, you have to go into Anglico reserves now. At the active duty Anglicos, like I said, half my team was jump qualified, but that's just because we made deals like when we would go on Muse and shit, we support Recon. So we're like, well, we always have a FIC, a firepower control team, a 4-man team or 4 or 5-man team that supports the reconnaissance element with their fires. So we try to get those guys to go, they get a couple jump seats and they go jump and stuff like that. But it's not a guarantee. I forget what we were talking about there. But yeah, man, jumping out of airplanes, that's I would have done it if they were going to pay me, but they weren't going to pay me for it. So I was like, there's no need. I'm already doing what I want to do. I'm a JTAC. At that point, I was a JTAC evaluator. I was a team chief. Yeah. Like, I'm doing all the fun stuff I'd want to do. I'm going out and running ranges every week and doing all this other stuff. Like, why add that to the mix if I don't need to? But
when I was at Fort Sill I graduated Fort Sill and we were going to Camp Lejeune, me and Asa, Major Asa Warrington, and we had even tried to take our own time and pay our own money because we found out there were open slots if you just took your own terminal leave to go to jump school.
I've heard that before, yeah.
We had lined it all up. We were getting ready to go, and they're like, no, you guys got to go to the MEF, man. You guys got to go to the fleet and do your job.
Yeah.
Like, no, we're going to take 3 weeks to go to jump school. Like, nope. Oh. You guys show up at Camp Lejeune and do your job. Or actually, Major Warrington was going to 29 Palms. I was going to Lejeune. But we were going to take 3 weeks and just pay for it ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard of that happening where guys have done that, where they've had like a gap between their training and then going to their units or something like that. So they've taken that opportunity to go. What I was thinking about before is a kid on my team. I remember one of the kids comes back from jump school from my firepower control team, Morton. I think it was Morton. And on their last jump, he was telling us on their last jump, they jumped and there was a kid who jumped out and his parachute got all tangled up or whatever. And the guy on the ground was yelling for him to like cut his chute, like yell. I guess they have like a megaphone or something. They're yelling up at him.
They tell you to pull your reserve.
Yeah, he's like, pull your reserve. Because he hit another dude's chute, got tangled up. And then they were like, pull your reserve. And the kid pulled his reserve and I guess it popped out and it didn't work. And he said the first sergeant was like, pull your reserve, and it didn't work. And he's like, oh shit, it didn't work, like over the megaphone.
On the microphone.
And the kid ended up living. Like, I think him hitting the other dude's parachute slowed him down enough that when he came off and then he continued on to the ground, he was going slow enough where it didn't kill him. And it didn't even injure him. I guess the only injury he received is after he hit the ground, there was a sudden gust of wind that inflated his reserve chute and then drug him and dislocated his shoulder. So after I heard that, I was like, dude, fuck that, man. Like, even more so, like, why do I want to go do it? The funny thing is that guy got his jump wings, though, because that was their last jump. So even though his chute didn't work, but anyway, back to you. So 10th Marines. So your first duty station was 10th Marines, right? So what was, as an active duty guy, what was it like, at this point, now you're active duty, did it feel weird checking into a unit as an active duty officer compared to like, when you were a reservist coming to a unit?
Yes and no. I really, you have these aspirations like, okay, hey, when you get promoted to corporal, I'm an NCO now, I'm going to change everything. You pick up sergeant, I'm a sergeant now, I'm going to change everything. And I think I had the same notions as a lieutenant, like, man, now I'm going to be able to change, at least affect my area of influence more than I always said I want to get rid of all the superfluous bullshit I see Marines doing, at least under my command, and just focus on the actual work that everyone wants to do. So I did show up as a prior enlisted. So you go on your alphas, you have, I don't show up with nothing. I had my ribbons and badges from my prior enlisted time. So all the Marines showing up go, oh, hey, he's Mustanger and stuff. But I think showing up to 10th Marines, all the years of other officers being told, hey, get with the priors and learn with the priors. I remember one of the senior lieutenants there goes, hey, we don't give a shit about that prior enlisted time. Here, you're the junior officer and just understand that. And that was like my first exposure. And I was like, nice to be here. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. So they were like, hey, motherfucker, we don't care about that shit on your chest or what you've done. You're the boot here, and you're going to do what we say. But I mean, I had a lot of aspirations to do stuff, but I think when I showed up, every billet was filled. As a junior officer, you're not going to come in and be the FDO or the guns platoon commander or the FSO, fire support officer. You're coming in to just kind of be Joe Snuffy. So you have all these aspirations to do a lot, and the next thing you know, like, oh, it's not like I would say when I went to the infantry, which is a whole nother story, where you get a platoon. I showed up and I didn't even have an FO team. There was not enough guys there. I showed up and I was like an extra officer.
Oh, really?
So yeah, so that, I mean, it just, all the billets were filled. I showed up and I kind of talked to the battery commander, and I just kind of I lobbied hard to get some sort of leadership billet. So he made me the motor T platoon commander. Actually, he made me, because artillery has such a huge motor T
footprint,
aspect to it. So I went down. I had a gunnery sergeant, and he was a motor T staff in COIC, and me and him worked. And I just took I learned everything I could about logistics, because if anyone doesn't understand about, as an artillery officer, no offense, artillery guys, they get a big head because they're the king of battle, and they do everything of a lot of other people's MOSs, but not everyone does their MOS. So at artillery school, you get the same POI, the period of instruction, that logistics officers get in logistics school. So I was getting into all the logistics stuff. I got with the warrant officer that was down there, and I just tried to wrap my hands around and get into there, because the motor T platoon had a lot of guys in it. So that was my first leadership role as an artillery guy, was going down, being a motor T platoon commander, pretty much, learning that until I got a fire support team. That when my enlisted guys showed up, you had comm guys that came over, and they finally got a full fire support shop.
Yeah. No, that's cool. People outside of the artillery community probably don't realize, or can't really fully understand the logistics burden of a artillery unit. Maintaining, I don't know if did you guys have Rolling Thunder then? Did you go to Bragg?
Yes.
Okay.
I did Rolling Thunder, and we won the Top Gun award.
Oh, nice. Yeah, well, hopefully you never had to be in charge of logistics for that, because that was
I was an FO at the time. I had a good spot for that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's just a logistics mess. Getting the entire regiment to drive down the road to Fort Bragg, always a couple vehicles break down, and then once you get there, you have guys spread out all over that base. Just trying to deal with that would be such a nightmare. What was it like for you, though, when you did join the fire support teams and you did get to go out to the hill and start doing some call for fire and stuff with your dudes? Like, did you feel, because now you're not, I mean, you've already done this stuff before, obviously. You get to do call for fire and TBS. You probably did it in MOS school as well. But now you're doing it in front of the guys that you're leading. They're no longer like your peers. These are people you're supposed to be in charge of or whatever. So what was that feeling like? Hey, I'm here with the dudes. I'm on the fire support team.
Yeah. Honestly, that was my artillery time. That was a peak of my artillery time. I got my fire support team. I still keep in contact with my scout observer 0861. He's in the State Department. He's got a PhD. This guy's super smart.
That's awesome.
But my scout observer and my 81's observer, I still keep in contact with him to this day. But to finally get a team and to go to the hill, and I have my comm guys, my scout observer, and we just called in artillery. I mean, we lived in the field, because I got to backtrack. I showed up. I didn't want to go to 510 because 510 was the UDT platoon or UDP battalion, and I didn't want to do UDP. I wanted to go on a MEU. So I landed in 310, and they were already getting worked up to go to the MEU, 26 MEU. So I was just lucky that we showed up and we got everybody, and so we were living on the hill all the time. Artillery, SEAD missions, air. We were just doing it. We lived, eat, and breathed fire support that whole time, and that's when I got to go to Vieques and do naval gunfire. I mean, that was kind of like the epitome of what everyone, when you're an FO and a Fort observer, that's what you dream about doing. And I wanted to go to the infantry as a Fort observer. I didn't really have aspirations on the MEU to stay in the battery as a FDO or guns platoon commander or an extra officer. I really wanted to get over as an FO and to be that fire support liaison for the infantry. So I got to say, it was a good time. Here's what happened that made it a good time, but a bad time. I was at Fort Steele going through artillery school, and that's when 9/11 happened. So I was sitting in a class at Fort Steele, and I was learning the BCS, the battery control system. It's like a computer system. You calculates all your fire stuff to send down to the guns. And we're learning all this complex, gunnery math. And then all of a sudden the captain walks in and they start talking to another captain. They're like, hey, everybody go to the conference room, and they turn on the TV and we're watching the trade towers on fire. And then we're just sitting there. And next thing you know, live, we see another plane hit the towers, and all the officers are just looking at each other like, oh, I think we're going to war.
Yeah.
So my entire, time as an officer was all war. And because I got my commission in 2000 and I left in 2007. So I was at artillery school when it happened. So when I got to the fleet, I knew we were going to war. So there was a different aspect. I think people before my era and after my era, I think I got the quintessential Marine Corps environment as a war fighting officer, path. I just went in and everything I did was focused towards the war.
Yeah. Yeah, that would have been an interesting time. I remember when I was going to join, there was a documentary that came out around that time about boot camp, and it was filmed when 9/11 happened. And I remember when they released it, like I just remember one of the recruits like looking at the camera like, are we at war? Like, they told us that we've been attacked. Are we at war? And that was just like, man, what a crazy, like, in their own minds. I mean, because before 9/11 happened, the people joining probably weren't thinking like, hey, we're going to war, we're going to do this, because there weren't really any major conflicts going on. I mean, there's always little spats. Go ahead.
That's why you would hope to get on a MEU. I wanted a MEU because that was kind of the best training. And we had guys in 310 that had went to Kosovo and like, man, I was in the VO, and they had combat action ribbons and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that, but they got that off a MEU. So my idea was a MEU was where the action was at before the war. It just so happened that I came in and a war broke out.
Yeah. Yeah, man, that would have been, I mean, did it feel like so after September 11th happened and you guys continued on with your training, did it feel like the priorities in training shifted at all? Or was there a noticeable difference in what you were doing now? Because it's like, holy shit, we're getting ready for like a war footing now. Like, this is like legitimate. Like, something's about to happen.
You always, when you go through training, enlisted or officer, you always hear, well, one day you may have to use this, or if you have to do this. But I've read a lot of Vietnam era books about officers. I've read a lot of Mustanger books, people who transitioned at that time over to officer. And my biggest comparity would be comparing a Vietnam officer knowing that they're going to war. I kind of felt like the atmosphere in the Marine Corps and everything was like, it's not if you guys go to war. When we get done with this, you guys are going to war. Mm-hmm. So I think everybody's attitude got even more serious. There was no... All of us knew as new lieutenants checking in, whether you were, whatever MOS you had, but all of us artillery guys, we knew we were going to go to war in some capacity. So I think everyone got very serious about everything. There was some joking and stuff, but it's just that the atmosphere changed. You could feel it. It's something, the tension and stuff you could cut with a knife. You couldn't. When the captains would come in and talk about stuff, everyone perked up and listened and made sure, like, hey, we got to know this stuff.
Yeah, the reality of the situation is in the back of your mind all the time. Even in all the joking and stuff like that. Did you see anybody that kind of started to regret their decision to join after it looked like you were going to war? Like, oh shit, I didn't actually want to go to war. I was just here for the benefits.
Yeah, I heard some of my officer peers that. It's a funny story. Some of the guys that I knew that were like in the bottom third of TBS who they wanted the sexy MOS at OCS and amongst the officers was intel. Everyone wanted intel.
Really?
The ground
air,
intel?
Oh, okay.
Signals, whatever. They wanted intel. A lot of the guys wanted the ground intel because the ground intel guys get sniper platoons and they go become sniper platoon commanders. So it's funny. A lot of the guys in the bottom third seemed at the time, they did not want combat arms. And I remember another guy that got ground intel. So ground intel officers have to go to infantry officers course. Mm-hmm. And he was not the most physically fit guy. He was not, like, it was not his arena. And he had to go to IOC. And he was just, how am I going to survive IOC? I barely survived TBS. And I just remember looking back to the fleet as I remember him being a chest thumper later, be like, oh, I'm a ground intel officer now. We're going to war. And I'm like, I remember you at the basic school. You were devastated you got IOC. And now you're talking a big game. And conversely, I had a friend that got infantry, a good guy, but he got relieved in command during the war. He's an LAV platoon commander. I won't say his name, but he just lost his mind apparently and didn't do good. Got relieved in command on the initial push. So, the whole saying that you can't polish a turd in the Marine Corps. Yeah, it's true. Like, real quickly, you saw people's true character come out during the war. Because some people just fell apart, It didn't matter how good you thought you were in training. You could be Mr. Ricky Recon or whatever, but when shit hits the fan and you don't perform or you lose your mind, you see people's true characters come out. So
Exactly.
I think I saw both spectrums. I saw people I didn't expect to do well, and they just became phenomenal commanders as well. I saw the converse of that too.
Yeah. I like how you put that though. Like, when the shit hits the fan, you got to be ready. A lot of people talk a big game, and it's like, shut the fuck up, quit talking. I don't care what unit you're with. I don't care what school you've been to. Show me that you can do it. And a lot of times those guys that talk a big game are the dudes that'll like hang towards the back when you're like asking for like, hey, we got a section of F-18s coming in. Who's next on the hooks for their controls? You got dudes like hanging to the back, like, oh, I got this. I got to go over here. Yeah, and it's like, hey, cool guy, come on. You're talking a big game. Let's step up and let everybody hear. And because that's one of those MOSs. Being a forward observer or being a JTAC is like everyone's listening to the radio while you're doing your call for fire or you're doing your control. And then they're all going to give you shit about it at the end, if you mess anything up. That's the good thing about artillery is they're very strict on any kind of verbiage and stuff that you're supposed to use.
Oh, they're very strict on everything because they have to be. There's not a margin for error there. You don't. Some
people are insane though, man. I've been out for a couple years and I posted something on Facebook. I wrote this piece up about. When I was with 10th Marines, I was out at Bragg, and we had an artillery piece explode. We had a cannon explode, in bore explosion happen.
155?
Yeah. They. So what happened is what I've been told. They had a bad fuse, a point detonating fuse. It was already set. And for those that understand how like a 203 works and stuff, the point detonating fuse, once it rotates a certain amount of time, like a spring releases, and then once it impacts, then it'll go off. So it has to rotate to set the fuse, and then once it impacts, it goes off. This fuse is already set. It hadn't, there was a default with the fuse. And when they rammed it, it exploded. And we had multiple guys get injured and stuff like that. Anyway, I wrote a piece about it because I had a buddy send me photos. I'd never seen photos of it, of what had happened. I wasn't the gun chief. I was the fires chief up on the hill. I was acting as the fires chief up on the hill, and I had approved that mission. It was a series. It was a second volley of a series that we were shooting. And I was involved with the whole, like, they call check fire and all this stuff. And we were like, shutting everything down. And the XO was up on the hill with me. And I'm like, sir, there's an explosion in the pause, all this stuff. Anyway, I wrote up this whole piece about it. And I think I said check fire in it instead of check firing. And some dude that I knew from the artillery world just started like giving me shit in the comments about it. And at first I thought he was just like joking, but he was like, people take this seriously. If you're not going to put it accurately, you shouldn't be putting it on the internet. People are going to think you're not a real artillery. And I'm like, whoa, dude, like I've been out for a couple years and so have you. Like, calm the fuck down. I get one word wrong and that's how artillery people are though. That's like that's the craziness of artillery people. But it's just that kind of stuff just drives me crazy. After you picked up your team and stuff like that, what was next for you? Like you're on a fire support team and you've got the training done like that and you're going on the MEU, right? Is this you sent me a MEU saying that you had gone in 2004 or is it 2003?
Yeah. 2003. So my friends that are my peers or officers say you had like every MOS except tanks.
Yeah.
Because I think the war is what spawned my odd career in the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. Because whereas you can enlisted, you can lat move to other MOSs. Mm-hmm. Officers like never lat move. They don't go to other jobs very rarely. They may do a B billet in another position, but to lat move to another MOS altogether it never happens. So I was an RD guy. I was an FO. We went to all we did was some fire support. When I got to do everything. We had we were on the hill doing F-18s, F-15s from Seymour Johnson. Naval Gunfire. I mean, we were doing everything we had ever trained to do. And when I went to the infantry, I was a what do I call that? First class swimmer or something, so to speak, or water, whatever that was. So when you go to the infantry on a MEU, you're either going to be in tanks, tracks, or tracks, air, or boats. Those are their insertion methods in the MEU. So because of my swim quals, my FO team and me they say, hey, you guys are going to boats because you guys have the best swim scores of the FO team. So you guys are going over to the boat company. So I showed up to the boat company with my FO team and I almost forgot about the battery. I loved it. I lived it. I breathed it. The battery kind of got mad at me because I didn't come out and hang out and stuff. I was immersed in the infantry. But a part of that reason was I showed up to 1st Battalion, 8th Marines, Bravo Company, and my company commander at the time, Captain Clark, they were short lieutenants.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't have enough infantry lieutenants. As a matter of fact, so when I came in, they had platoon sergeants running platoons because they just didn't have enough lieutenants, but everyone was going on the mule and we were going to war. So he said, hey, you're my fire support guy. I'm going to make you my weapons platoon commander because you're going to be the FIST team leader.
Okay.
So I was like, cool. I'm going to be the FIST team leader. And so literally I came into an infantry company and I got a platoon right away as a platoon commander. I was the weapons platoon commander. So I had all the assaultmen. I had all the mortarmen, which is the big reason why he wanted me over there.
Mm-hmm.
Assaultmen, mortarmen, and machine guns. So I got a platoon sergeant, came over, and he goes, no one's going to know fire support better than you. Why wouldn't I put my artillery guy in charge of my mortars? And no one, all my peers and other lieutenants in the infantry were cool with it. Like, hey, cool, we got a fire support. They didn't want it because honestly, fire support sometimes some guys want it, or some guys, like you say, run from it.
Yeah.
But as an RD guy, I was like, hey, give me the fire support. I mean, no offense, but mortars would be easy compared to artillery.
It's confusing for people that haven't been around it. Like trying to. Yeah. The first time someone tries to explain deconfliction of ground and air fires while doing maneuver, people are like, what the fuck are you talking about? How do you figure all this out so quickly? And it's like, it's just one of those things you just start. I always told guys, I'm like, the best people in our MOS, as JTACs or forward observers, are the guys that can take in a bunch of information and spit out a safe, executable plan. Like, hey man, we're doing this call for fire, or we're doing this airstrike, and we're bringing it in this way because these guys are here, and this is here, and this is, they can justify it and they understand what they're doing. But it takes a person that can fully understand a 3D battle space, and not everybody's capable of that. It's very confusing if you're not, even for people that are good at it, it's very confusing at first until you get the hang of it, and that's why I've always been kind of against the whole. In the Marine Corps, we send guys off to be JTACs for 2 years, and they're like, all right, good job, bud. Now go back to be a platoon sergeant or something like that. And it's like, bro, he just figured it out. He just figured it takes 2 years to fully understand it. Now you're sending him away. But real quick,
I think the infantry platoon commanders wanted to be straight leg infantry platoon commanders too. They looked at weapons platoon as like, well, all of those guys get detached to the other line platoons, and then you got to run the FIST team. A lot of my infantry peers, they wanted that straight leg infantry, like let me close with and destroy the enemy. So they were cool with like, hey, Lieutenant Gordon, you be the weapons guy and the FIST team leader, so we can actually do the line platoon stuff. Yeah,
and it's cool too because you strip away all those dudes and you keep basically the mortar platoon, right? But the mortar platoon sergeant is an 0844, 0848 or whatever it is, the FDC chief. Right,
he is, but in the line companies, my highest ranking FDC guy for a 60 mortars was a corporal.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense in the line companies.
81 platoon, which is in the weapons company, that 81 platoon sergeant, he's a higher rank guy. That he's an 0341, and those are your smart grunts, as they always say. So my FDC, the head of my FDC for mortars was a 0341, but then I have my 0861 and my comm guys, my guys that came from artillery with me, they knew fire support left, forwards and backwards.
Yeah.
If something was to happen to me, they could have picked up and ran with it with no problem.
That's the way it's supposed to be, That's good. That's good on you and good on them for being ready for that. I'd like to real quick talk about go back to what you're talking about with the boat company and stuff like that, because this is kind of a concept that people have become less familiar with as the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were going on, because that was a MU thing, that was like a MU concept. So people that never did a MU or, their units only rotated to Afghanistan don't really fully understand that concept. And I think it's coming back more. I think we're sending more and more people to the Raiders course, the raid course and stuff like that to learn boats. Yeah. Can you explain what you did in boat company? What's their role and what kind of training that you do to prepare to deploy as a boat company?
The boat company to me is you have a higher incidence of injuries because, man, you're cold, miserable, and wet, and you're on the black Zodiac boats that you see on TV, the SEALs or Marine Corps or whatever G.I. Joe cartoon you watch.
Yeah.
Those Zodiac boats, that's what we do. That is the way we get from ship to shore in boat company. It's all about, on the MU, your insert method. So you're either going to fly in with helos, you're gonna kind of float in with Amtraks, or you're going to go in with boats. So as a boat company, your footprint, the way you get in is the whole infantry company learns boat craft. So you have all the best swimmers in the battalion, in the infantry battalion, go to boat company. And then my company commander was a former Recon guy.
Oh, that helps.
So that's why he got boat company. And then my battalion commander, Colonel Hogue, was a Recon legend. He was in 1-8 when Beirut happened. He's one of the only lieutenants that survived Beirut when the bombing happened. But my battalion commander was Recon, and my company commander was Recon. So that's kind of why that's why my company commander got his selection to boats. I went to boats because of my swim qual was high, and same thing with my scout observers. So I sent my scout observer. I just immersed him into the boat company. He became a scout swimmer. So they come off the boats, go into hydrographic surveys, and make sure the beach is available for us to land at the BLS, the beach landing site. Myself and my 60s FDC chief, he went with me to over the horizon navigation school. That's another thing that some of the other lieutenants shy away from is OTH, because it's kind of a hard course, because you learn like navigation with the stars, with sextants and compass. You got nautical charts, and you're doing all kinds of stuff. And when you're in a boat company and you do your navigations, you got to do 100 nautical mile navigations. You get graded on that with the MEU. You go out, and when you're 20 miles over the horizon, that's when ships actually disappear up the horizon. So that's why they call it OTH. So there's a lot of me being an artillery guy, just understanding all that math and weird science that goes involved. Over the horizon navigation school was just a natural fit. So I was the chief navigator for the boat company, and they sent me and a couple other enlisted guys. They sent one other lieutenant as a backup, redundancy. I went to Vieques for naval gunfire for like 3 weeks while the MEU was still working up. And I think some of the other navigators kind of got complacent, because when I came back, they're like, you will never go away from the company again. Took them up the New River Inlet, landed at the wrong beach site, ran through the swamps. They got a bad grade. They're like, yeah, you're never leaving again. And I almost felt justified, because it was kind of a thankless job. Like, oh, we just get to where we got to go automatically. And I'm like, no, I actually have an important job, guys. And I got a funny story later on the MEU, if you want to hear it, about doing legit over the horizon navigation with nautical charts in the middle of the ocean with SEAL Team 4. And that came back to like legit having to use no GPSs, no compasses. I had to actually use the stuff that I used from schooling during that mission with SEAL Team 4. I was glad I had that experience at that time.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to tell the story now, go ahead. It was for this MEU that we're talking about already?
It was for this MEU. We had already done our time in Iraq, which is a whole nother story, but we were working with SEAL Team 4 out of Rota, Spain. And we were doing a hydrographic survey because we were going to land the MEU on the beach of Liberia, because Charles Taylor had kind of taken the dictatorship, who we put in power in Liberia, and was keeping all the food. And we were doing a humanitarian mission, but we were going to land the MEU on the beach. But the beach actually had some hostile forces and some people that were there just to, mess with us on the MEU. So the SEAL team came in. We were going to do a whole hydrographic survey on how we were going to link up and get the MEU ashore.
Can you explain what a hydrographic survey is for those that don't know?
Okay, sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
A hydrographic survey is basically where scout swimmers, SEALs, recon guys, we go into the beach and we make sure there's no mines, no obstacles. You do even like sand composition, like is this a cliff, like something you'd see off the side of Korea where you just can't walk up on the beach? Is it rocky? Is it sandy? Is there vegetation? And your scout swimmers, kind of the commercial stuff, they go in and they do reconnaissance and they make sure like, okay, there's no hostiles, there's no bad guys. And the biggest part of it is the logistics footprint. Can a Marine Expeditionary Unit land their troops here? So you're basically making sure that you can get from the ship to the shore all the personnel, equipment, and everything. And then you're going to come back and report to the MEU commander like, yes, sir, we can land about this much equipment, this much personnel. It'll take this much time. You're basically assessing the situation to land. So the SEALs came in to do that because they were in Rota. They were close to Liberia. They just had to fly down. We were a boat company, and so we were used to doing boat stuff. So it was a real-world mission. It maybe not be the sexiest of mission, but it kind of turned into one, where we were doing a hydrographic survey. So we planned up this whole mission, but the sea state was awful. If you have a sea state of 3, you're not supposed to – it's like go or no-go criteria. And the sea state was horrible. And they talked about Liberia. It's kind of like, they have hyenas on chains there with muzzles. I mean, they just throw people in the water when they're dead, like roadkill. We had a body that floated all the way out to the MEU. we floated off the coast of Liberia for a while, and there's like a body that bumped up the side of the ship. And I remember we're looking over the side, it's all bleach washed from the sun and everything. It was just this weird country where there were no rules. It was just chaos. So because they dumped so many bodies in the ocean, we got reports that sharks just eat the bodies all the time in the water and stuff. So long story short, we worked up this whole mission, planned this mission. Our scout swimmers and the SEALs we were going to take them to the release point. Our scout swimmers were going to go in. And I digress, I'll go back up. When you come off the ship, we come off the ship in an LCU, which is a smaller version where all the boats kind of stack up on the ship and comes out of the back of our larger ships. So we come out of the LCU on our ships. The ships stay over the horizon so they can't be seen. The LCU has a lower profile in the water. So we went to our release point. We linked up with the SEALs. They had ribs, the rubber inflatable boats that have the machine guns on them and they can kind of stand up and stuff. Mm-hmm. We had our Zodiac boats. So we linked up with them. The sea state was awful. We barely made it off. Everything is at night, like in the Marine Corps. Everything's at night, not during the day. So we go in, we release our scout swimmers, and the LCU goes back to link up with the ARG, the Amphibious Readiness Group. And we release our guys. Well, the sea state was so bad, once we released our scout swimmers, one of the ribs for the Navy SEAL team, they lost their engines. Oh. And they were like lost in the surf, and they couldn't get out. And so the scout swimmers made it to shore with the SEAL teams, the SEAL team, part of the SEAL Team 4, which was also the Navy lieutenant who was in charge of that SEAL team was with them. They made it to shore, but their rib was just adrift in this horrible sea state. So we were all linked up at night with our Zodiacs, with the ribs, and the SEALs go, "Hey, let go! We're going to rescue our guys." So they just bounced off, almost ripped the cords out of the guy's hands. Didn't even say anything. They went to save their guys that were lost in the surf, and then all of a sudden we said, "Hey, we're aborting the mission. We're not going to do this." And we're like, "Well, what about the scout swimmers and the teams that are stuck on the shore?" They're like, "Hey, forget about them. You guys, we're all going to die if we don't get back to the ship right now." All these, because we were in Zodiac boats. They lost a rib, a gigantic boat. Yeah. We were in Zodiac boats, and like you'd come up on a crest and you'd see waves that were 10, 15 feet high. Yeah. So they're like, "Hey, Lieutenant Gordon at the time, get us back to the LCU." Well, as a navigator, before I did this mission, I planned the rally points in the water on the big ship. So I planned on my link up point and rally point, and I'm like, "Hey, sir, you're asking me to link up with a ship that's moving in the ocean. We're moving in the ocean and we're adrift." They're like, "Hey, we got to do it." So I'm literally pulling out nautical charts on the bottom of a Zodiac boat with my slide rules, old school, and I'm plotting a course as a ship's going in the water. We're going in the water to link up with them. Mm-hmm. And in the middle of the night, like on MVGs. Yeah. Like surf's just going, and I'm like, well, I guess this is what I get paid the big bucks for.
Yeah, man, that's crazy.
So I kind of set up a brief rally point. My comm guys radio, and hey, we're the ship and us. We're just gonna drive in the same direction at the same time and hope we link up. We finally spotted it. We link up, but the front of those boats come down and they got big chains on them, mm-hmm. and we have to drive up the ship and drive on them, throw them a rope, and they pull us up. Yep. Well, when that ship would come over the water, the whole front of that ship came out of the water and then smashed down. So we come up over a swell, and we got to make sure we're lined up to go up the ramp. Yeah. Ships are coming up, and they're just coming up the chains and running off the side, broaching their boats, having to get back in. So it was a clusterfuck getting back on that boat in the middle of that sea state. We got broached out of our boats. Our comm gear has to be waterproof because no one wants batteries in the middle of the ocean. You'll explode because of the chemical composition of the battery makeup that we have. So it just turned into a shit show. The scout swimmers got left on the beach. The SEALs finally linked up. Our scout swimmers actually had to, with the SEAL team, had to hunker down that night because there actually were active patrols trying to look for them. And by the end, we got our scout swimmers back. The helicopters came and got them. We recovered the mission and went back. But it was a shit show from the beginning on that one.
Man, dude, that sounds crazy. Like you left guys on the beach, and there were like real world adversary patrols out looking for them.
Yeah, I talked to the SEAL team commander before. I talked to him. I'm like, because they were the scout swimmers and SEAL team went into the beach, and they were like, hey, they saw that other boat lost power and was lost in the surf, which mm-hmm. could have broached it. They could have lost the whole boat. They were trying to make it back out through the surf passages to get back out to help the boat. And that Navy SEAL commander was a stud, man. He goes, this is the first and only time that me and my SEAL team couldn't do surf passages and make it back out. The sea state was that bad that they're like, we could not get back to the boat if our life depended on it. The only thing they could do was go back to the beach, hunker down, and then they waited the next day, and one of the helicopter teams with a QRF went and landed and picked them up. But he's like, that was the worst surf that SEAL Team commander had ever seen, and he was one of the commanders for SEAL Team 4 over there in Rota. He was like, yeah, this sea state was awful. Later on, he goes, I wanted to do the mission, but we probably should not have done this mission.
It's hard for people that may not be familiar with the ocean to understand the power of the waves in the impact zone. When right there by the beach, that like 100 to 200 yard area right there, where if something like that happens, where a boat can get turned sideways or something like that, easily, like even a larger boat, easily can get flipped over and just completely decimated if the sea state is bad enough. It's I've gone out a couple times on that board, and it is fucking sketchy sometimes. Yeah. Like paddling out there and seeing these massive waves coming to pound down on you. It's just that is not a good feeling. I can't imagine what it was like being in a foreign country, like in a real world situation where like there could be like people looking for you and all this shit's happening at the same time. Like that's stress, man. That's real stress right there.
We did it after Iraq too. We'd already gone into Iraq. We got pulled out of Iraq to go to Liberia. And I was thinking, man, I almost died in Iraq, but I'm probably going to die off the coast of Liberia tonight because this is a fucking shit sandwich.
That's crazy, dude. So let's back up and let's talk about you guys going to Iraq. So you were on the MEU. Did you guys know, like when you were deploying, they're like, hey, we're going to Iraq? Did you take the boat to Iraq, or did you guys fly? Because for a little while they were taking MEUs and flying them to Iraq and then getting on boats on their way home.
Well, I got to back up a little bit. When I went to 1-8 as an infantry platoon commander, went over as a weapons platoon commander, the infantry battalion got a little upset that the captain put a 08-02 artillery officer in charge of a weapons platoon commander.
I bet.
Weapons platoon. Because they're like, you got an arty guy running an infantry platoon? And so my platoon, exactly. My captain goes, hey, Lieutenant Gordon, would you be willing to go to infantry officers course? And I go, sure. He goes, maybe I can get you in the 2 or 3 week reserve course. Then you'll get the secondary MOS as an 08-02. I'm like, okay, I'll go. He's like, hey, they came back. They won't let you go to the reserve IOC course, but you can do the full 10-week course during the MEU workup. And I'm like, okay, I'll go. So I'm a first lieutenant. I went to IOC as a 08-02, show up there. It's never happened that they've had. I show up to the platoon commanders. And the platoon commander's like, man, we've never seen this. We have a first lieutenant, an 08-02, been in the fleet. So I show up, I go through IOC. I literally teach the fires portion of IOC for that class because they're like, why am I as a 03-02 going to teach fires? They're like, Lieutenant Gordon, you're teaching fire support for this class. I'm like, okay, I'll teach fire support.
Yeah.
So I went through all of IOC with a bunch of IOC infantry platoon commanders. They were great. They're like, hey, we'll take a first lieutenant that's been in the fleet. So I go through IOC, which is a whole nother story I could go off on tangents on. Come back to the fleet, get that secondary MOS, and then the battalion was kind of like, okay, he's hominis dominus, he's one of us, you can be a platoon commander. And so then I went over as a weapons platoon commander over to Iraq. We went over on the boat. We went over to the Med, and we started doing a Med float. And our MEU commander, our battalion commanders, they were always trying to find work, so to speak, because the rest of the Marines went over to Iraq and they went to Kuwait and stuff and started setting up for the war. But we were trying to figure out our part, like how are we going to get involved in this, at least at the higher command level. Me knowing a little bit of what the talk was as an officer. I was a company grade lieutenant, not like I got much talk. But I know that they were trying to find work. So we did a lot of waiting in the Med, and we offloaded in Crete in Greece. For a while there, no country would let us offload. The war was going on. They didn't agree with the war. They said, nope, you guys can't come off in our country.
Really?
Greece let us come off, said, hey, you guys can offload and go to war. But you can't bring no combat equipment, no weapons, no. It's like, well, that doesn't work. We can't do that.
Yeah.
So they finally said, yeah, they'll let us come in, take our combat arms elements and go off. So we offloaded in Crete. We got on C-130s and they started flying the MEU and the battalion into Erbil, which is just from Mosul. And so we were going to be the northern blocking force for the push because they had, I think it was 10th Corps for the Iraqi army. We were going to be the blocking force in the northern sector so that they didn't come down and reinforce Baghdad and the rest of that. So we started offloading into Erbil and Mosul, Iraq, and we started doing missions up there. But we just got the infantry battalion in, and we got one LAV in, and Greece shut it down and said, nope, no more you guys can come off. So we didn't get no RD guys, nothing. We had an infantry battalion light, 1 LAV in the northern sector doing patrols, and they were still working on that. And then the initial push started happening, and we fought up there during that time. And then the infantry came up and reinforced us once they made the push up from the north. We were doing patrols in Mosul, hunting down Ba'ath Party loyalists that had took off their uniforms and just kind of blended in with the local populace.
Yeah.
But a funny story for all of my FO community and RD guys, when we flew in as a FIST team, I had to take the mule.
Oh.
So I don't know if you guys remember what the mule is. That thing is...
I haven't carried it, but I've had a few people come on, some of the older guys come on and talk about the mule and like the tripod and everything, it all weighing like 100 pounds for the whole thing, or 90 pounds.
I carried part of it. My scout observer carried part of it. My pack was 120 pounds when I went into combat. I had the actual mule laser. I made the decision that, hey, we're not going to take the tripod. We'll just put it on a pack if we have to use it. We took the cables, the batteries, and we split all the gear up between me and the rest of my FIST team. But being a straight leg infantry unit, everybody had to carry 2 mortars. My machine gun guys, you're talking about, guys that have machine guns. Everyone had to carry enough machine gun ammo, enough mortars. The mortarmen, they got screwed. They had to carry base plates. They had to carry, their bipods, the mortar tubes, because we were going in full-fledged war. Everything we carried in was what we had.
Yeah, yeah. That's so first, real quick, I think that's an interesting point you make about how there's countries that didn't want us to be in that war, so they wouldn't let us offload equipment and stuff like that. And I think that's a point that some people forget when they see us doing diplomatic relations with other countries that they may not agree with or something like that, and they don't understand the fuller picture of something like that, where like that's why we maintain some of these diplomatic relationships with countries that may be kind of questionable. And it's, I mean, with like Turkey, like if you don't, people obviously know now, but at the time it's like Turkey was like the only place that was letting us run air, like that was that was where we could run our aircraft and stuff through that area. So I just wanted to touch on that.
Allowed us to fly through their airspace because no other country would allow us to fly from Greece over to their airspace. No country would allow us. So we had to not only coordinate with Greece to offload, but we had to coordinate Turkey in order. And General Jones, I believe, was a NATO commander at the time, a former Marine commandant. So we were lucky. He kind of coordinated to Turkey to like, hey, can the MEU fly through your airspace? And when we got off the boat in Greece, there were big spray painted signs like NATO bastards go home. Like they did not want us in Greece. They're like, no, we don't want you guys here. So we had to coordinate with Turkey, as you brought up, to fly through their airspace to actually get over to the war.
Yeah, yeah. Can you kind of talk about, so for guys like me that, came in a little bit later into the, whole global war on terrorism, stuff like that. When I went to Iraq for the first time, or when I went to Iraq, we went to Kuwait, like you said, and then we flew into, I think I flew into TQ, and then I stayed basically in TQ the whole time.
Out to Kadam Airfield.
Yep. And then when I went to Afghanistan, we flew out to Manas or Manas, however you say it, in Kyrgyzstan, and then into Afghanistan, like Leatherneck, and then we'd fly out to our actual patrol bases or whatever, our COPs or FOBs. What was it like going into a place where this isn't an established war? You guys are the first ones. So like, where did you fly into? Like when you landed, like what was there? What was there around you? And then kind of how did you guys get, all right, well, we're here. How did you get set up for that? Like, what was the, kind of your order of battle here? What was the planning process for what you were about to go do?
I have to go back to saying that my best analogy is Vietnam Air lieutenants. Because as we were flying into Erbil, there's only so much that can go into a C-130. And then once we got in a C-130 to get to Mosul, we flew in 53s. There were Air Force 53s, all different Army. Army had Black Hawks. So we literally showed up in Erbil. And the way that my company commander split it up is, if you don't know this in an infantry company, you have your company commander, your XO. Well, the next person in the chain of command is your weapons platoon commander. Is third in the chain of command in an infantry company, because he's usually the senior lieutenant. I was a senior lieutenant at the time. So the way my company commander split it up is, hey, XO, you're going to be on the last stick coming in, and I'm going to take the FIST team leader and the weapons platoon commander with me to set up shop. And as they come in, we'll organize our company that way. So I went in on the first wave with the first group of people off the Mew. We landed in Erbil, and we're like, well, now how are we going to get from Erbil to Mosul? Because the battalion had already got some guys up there. The colonel was already up in Mosul with part of an infantry unit. But that was Cowboys and Indians territory. There were no good guys up there.
Yeah.
There actually later on there was 84 Special Forces unit, but they were like plain clothes, running around, just doing demoralizing operations up there. So they really didn't have no ass in the game. They just barely could, BB gun fight with this 10th Corps.
Yeah.
So we show up in Erbil, and my company commander goes and he just, hey, Lieutenant Gordon, you got the company. I'll be back. He goes and commandeers a helicopter. He goes, I got us a ride on a helicopter. There was an Air Force 53 that he found that had no one on it. He goes, hey, get the rest of the company to go over here. So we all load up in this 53 and we jump in there and everyone sits down, and I didn't have a fucking seat. I'm like sitting down in this, and we're going to be flying a map of the earth from Erbil to Mosul. So, because they're like, hey, we get shot at every time we go from here to there. So buckle up. And that was a hairy ride. I have 120 pounds on my back. I got a mule strapped to my pack, was it modular unit, lasing designator? I don't know what it stands for anymore. But I'm carrying this thing that I don't really think I need, but I may need. We run on they're flying a map of the earth. We have a couple of, shots fired at us. They're flying. I felt like I was going to fall to the back because I had no seat to sit on. The 50 cal gunner was on the seat, just returning fire every time we got fired. And I'm like, well, this is it. This is combat, not knowing anything else. We offload in Mosul. Again, my company commander disappears. I'm going to go find the battalion commander, find out our mission, stay here. And when the rest of the company's coming in, so helicopters are coming in, and they were just offloading. We didn't even have a full company. We had part of the weapons company, or weapons platoon, part of some of the line platoons that were there. I had one other platoon commander with me, Lieutenant Kudelek. He was a Citadel grad, good buddy of mine. We're there with part of our infantry company. We're kind of like setting down a defense at an airfield in Mosul. And the company commander's going back getting his briefs from the battalion saying, hey, I'm going to go get our direction. He comes back and he goes, hey, we're going to go link up with Charlie Company in the northern section of this airfield. He gets like, go up. It's about 3 clicks up the way. He just literally showed me on a map in a general direction. I'm like, is there a grid, sir? He's like, no, they're just up there in this area. And I'm like, okay. And my buddy, that platoon commander is like, this is bullshit. We're supposed to have a direct mission. I'm like, Matt, this is just the way it is, bro. We just got to figure it out.
Yeah.
I see an army group of guys. They had commandeered like these little trucks. They're like a motor T company, but they had Iraqi trucks. I did not want to hump 3 clicks with a mule to link up.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
My guys weren't going to be able to link up with everything. So I go over and ask this army guys, hey, will you get us from here to there? Can you get us to this point on the map? Yeah, no problem. Jump on. We had 3 trucks for an infantry company. We looked like the Beverly Hillbillies. Yeah. Every Marine was so happy that they did not have to hump all the bullshit they had. Because we had mop gear, too. I didn't talk about that. Because we didn't know if we were going to chemically attack. So we had all this mop gear. We were partly in. We climbed onto these trucks, and I'm not joking. Marines were on the hoods, on the bumpers, on the sides, holding on to each other, just so they didn't have to hump up to the northern sector to link up with the other company that came in before us, part of the company. And we finally got up there, and I'm hearing some stuff. This is kind of my first exposure. I'm hearing some stuff around me. I don't know what it is. I just hear some stuff. And I see one of the 2 commanders from Charlie Company run up to me. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, we're here to help you. Get off the trucks. You guys are being shot at.
Oh.
So we were being shot at. And when I told the Marines, get off the truck, we're being shot at, they just fell off like ants. Everyone just fell off, took their positions. And we just started reinforcing the company and going from there. But it was kind of an unknown feeling to hear rounds whipping by you. You didn't really understand. They weren't impacting anywhere.
Yeah.
So you just heard the noises and like, what's going on?
What is that noise?
What is it? Yeah. What is that cracking noise going by us? We were just happy we weren't humping.
Oh, I bet. But so it sounds like, so when you guys got there, you're saying you took over an airfield. Was this was the beginning of the war? Was this an unopposed airfield? There was no one there?
There was a SF team. There were 84 special forces operators in the Mosul area that were trying to contain it. They were calling in airstrikes. They were just doing like pecking at them as much as they can to make them think we were a bigger force.
Oh, okay.
Doing sniper ops, air ops, trying to make them think they were a bigger force. So we linked up with them. They could not secure an airfield by themselves because they would just get overran. So they were happy to have an infantry battalion And so we started filling in those gaps we basically took an airfield like you would read about in any book.
Okay.
We took the airfield, we established a perimeter of that airfield, and then we started going into the town of Mosul and doing patrols and raids. And what people don't realize is the Ba'ath Party headquartered loyalists, Saddam's most loyal of loyal, were up there. And they what they did is they got smart. They took out the whole 10th Corps, a corps of Iraqi forces, took off the uniforms and blended into Mosul. And Mosul was the third most populated city. I think it had 2 million people.
Yeah.
So we were in a large metropolitan area. But I very specifically, I don't count that first adventure getting shot at as a firefight. We actually went and took the Ba'ath Party headquarters in Mosul because the SF team, if you remember, was hunting down Uday and Qusay. Saddam's sons were up in that area. They got intel. So they were hunting them down. So we were actually trying to reinforce them to help them find and locate those high-value individuals. So we actually took the Ba'ath Party headquarters, and of all the firefights that I've ever been in, that was probably the one that sticks out of my mind because it's the first time as a young lieutenant in a firefight. You know, I remember every aspect of that firefight, and it probably happened 5 to 7 minutes altogether.
How many times have you gone through and thought about different ways you would have done different things, you know, post that, you know?
Every time, it's always afterwards looking back.
Yeah.
But the best way to explain my first firefight, if you've ever watched, is it not Behind Enemy Lines? The one where they're at a building with a bunch of civilians and there's enemy mixed in between them and they start taking fire from them.
You're where they're at the embassy, right? On the rooftop of the embassy? Yeah.
I can't remember that movie.
Where that dude's like, waste the motherfuckers. Samuel L. Jackson.
That is my very first firefight. My very first firefight is that in a mix. We're at the Ba'ath Party headquarters. We took it. We took the building. We secured it. I set up a whole fire support plan as a 15 leader. Unfortunately, later when we E&E'd out of there, I destroyed it because I couldn't take it with me. But we started having civilians mixed in with the local populace, and we started taking fire. I remember, and all my, everyone talks up a good game. We're like, man, if I'm in the fight, I'm just gonna mow it down, motherfuckers. I'm just gonna lay a base of fire. Well, that first firefight happened. I remember every face in my platoon just turned and looked up at me, like, "What do we do, sir?" It probably happened in a half a second, but they weren't looking like we don't know what to do. They're asking for permission.
Yeah.
Like, what do we do? And I was like, lay down a base of fire, put down that machine gun. And once I took them off the chain, they just started mowing it down. We had snipers in Overwatch in the Ba'ath Party headquarters, and I remember they were taking shots, and I just remember seeing guys just falling. I watched my one of my 240 gunners. I don't know how graphic we get on this, but I watched him from basically like if you're at a house and you're across the street, he just cut a guy in half.
Oh man!
He fell one way, fell this way, one way, fell that way because he was shooting at us. So I would say my platoon did awesome though, because there were no, afterwards when we started, doing sensitive site exploitation on the casualties we created, I'll say, there were no civilian deaths. Like the snipers were taking shots, my machine gunners, my riflemen, everybody were taking, very accurate shots. And there wasn't a civilian body that we found out there during that first firefight.
Yeah.
It was nothing but bad guys. And bad guys were pulling up in taxi cabs and trying to limit. I remember they were putting guys in the back of cars and driving them away. So I specifically remember watching them like, man, they're taking their dead with them. They were being smart.
Yeah. So as an officer, this is your first time, you're in the firefight, man. You're in it now. What for you, what was it like to be like, you said everyone looked at you and then you just started directing like, hey, you do this, you do that. Did you feel like that was where you needed to be? Did you feel like you were like, it was all coming together, like all the training, was coming together and like the reality is like, hey, this is working because of all my training? I mean, I guess kind of explain your thought process as an infantry officer directing fires and giving that, doing your job, I guess, because that's just, it's hard for someone that has never been in that kind of situation to understand the kind of chaos that can easily occur if someone doesn't if there's not a cool head and be like, hey, this is what we got to get done and maintain the pressure on the right spots, So can you kind of explain what that was like to be that guy, to be that platoon commander? Like, you, and let me add a little context to this. You joined, you're in MOS school and you find out the country got attacked and you find out you're probably going to war and now you're there,
Yeah.
this was it. This was holy shit. It's here now. Like,
Yeah.
what was that like to be like, holy shit, it's happening? Like everything I've been training for at this point for 10 years almost, because you were in the reserves, like it's all happening. So can you kind of go into that?
I would say my first combat tour this time was the quintessential combat experience, what every Marine officer or Marine infantryman or anyone that joins the Marines wants to do. Everyone talks a good game, like how they're going to act in war. And I'll say this, not one of my Marines pussed out and cried or crawled in the fetal position. If anything, I had to pull some of them back a little bit. But when shit hit the fan and we were stressed, they almost wanted that permission. Like, okay, is it? Can I do my job now? You know, it's like a dog's wanting to work.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to go out there and handle business. So I had this experience in a lot of the firefights I've been in. Is I'll lay down a base of fire, and I'll think, oh, I'm going to lay down a couple of rounds in directions that I see stuff. But then I got to get on the radio. I got to call in fire or call in an airstrike.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I was the FIST team leader. So I laid down a base of fire a couple of times, and my Marines did. And then my FIST team was right to my right and left. And I told them, hey, we got to get up to the top of this building. It was a high-rise building at the Bath Party headquarters. I go, we got to get up to the top of this building so we can actually see, so we can direct fires. So me and my FIST team and my security team, we were running up through the Bath Party headquarters to get to the top. And we had some Peshmerga guys, some of the Turkish guys that are on our side going with us. And they were doing the Tony Santana, like just shooting at the hip, firing whatever. And I just remember going, fucking put that in your shoulder or something. I'm like, these guys are going to kill us. So I told my platoon, I'm like, keep them in front of us. We were pushing them up the stairs. Keep them in front of us. Plus, you know, they were doing stupid shit.
Yeah.
So we went to the top to call for fires, what I wanted. And my team and me, we worked at this whole mission, and this probably happened within 2 minutes. We called in a fire mission. We got all set for the fire mission because we were going to have 81 mortars.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to call in 81 mortars. And because everything was so close, the weapons company commander denied our call for fire.
Oh.
I was so livid. We were in the shit. We could have used fires. I was an FO with a FIST team.
Mm-hmm.
I called in a perfect mission. My scout did, and they denied our fires. They said, danger close. And I'm like, well, these bullets seem danger close. I'd much rather have some. If anyone knows about the direction of mortars, their high angle of fire makes them a little less accurate than artillery.
Mm-hmm.
So the weapons company commander, who is the deconflicting agency, worried that the mortars may drop on us instead of by us, whereas I had called in a fire mission further out, and I was going to walk it back towards us. I just wanted the enemy to say, hey, we just don't got bullets. We also got and combined arms is what you want to put the enemy in. And that's what I got paid to do. But my first fire mission got denied, and I was fucking pissed off. And then I just had to start returning fire with M16.
That's funny that I know that pain of getting a mission denied when you're, in contact. You're like, what the fuck? Like, how can that person down there on the other, that's not even here, tell me that I don't need this right now? But I think that's cool that you, as a professional, fires guy, thought that out and was like, hey, I'm gonna put the impacts farther out and then walk them in, like you're supposed to do. But however, your thought process doesn't translate to someone else. They don't really understand why you're doing what you're doing and the safeties that you've built into it. That sucks, man. That's tough.
Imagine being in New York City and calling in fires in between skyscrapers. That's what I was doing.
Yeah.
That's the best way to explain it. Because we were taking fire right across the street from another building. So the fire direction center that was back there, they were just worried, like, oh my God, you guys, where you're calling for fire is like 500 meters from you. We're worried about the mortars landing on it. And plus the mortars, if our fire support guys, the mortars they're kind of behind us. Mm-hmm. They were off to our right and left in the battalion position. So ideally you want them kind of a little bit offset from that position. So they were worried about them dropping short. Maybe you get a bad fuse or something, like, oh, they're going to land on your position.
Yeah.
But yeah, we got returned fire. I remember I was most pissed off because there was a kid in the crowd and he threw like this freaking 10-inch bolt and he threw it at me and he hit my hand. I thought he broke my finger because I was more pissed about that than anything because when he threw that bolt, I was like, man, I felt like my finger was broken.
Oh, yeah,
and it hit me, it smashed my finger against my M16. But it's funny the little things you remember. I remember shooting my very first round. I had an ACOG, and the rounds hit in front of me, and they hit the wall in front of me. Oh. They didn't go over the wall because my ACOG set up, and I was so close that I got splashed back from the cement, and I was like, what the fuck am I taking fire? And I'm like, I just shot the fucking wall.
How big of an idiot did you feel at that point? We're like, ah, damn it.
My whole team did it. We all did it with our ACOGs.
Oh, that's
and
hilarious.
we got to aim up over this stuff. And so that firefight, I could talk for hours on that first firefight amongst the other firefights or Fallujah that I was in. That firefight is kind of stained in my brain forever. No one got hurt. We didn't lose any Marines.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time, we actually got one thing that I didn't get my fire support mission, but I got AC-130 airships.
Nice.
On scene. We started doing show of force with the Spookies and the Spectre gunships the rest of the time that we were there. So I got to do some stuff. I wasn't even a JTAC yet.
Yeah. Well, that was a different time too, back in 2003, right. Like 2004, early 2000s, you know, enlisted guys couldn't be JTACs. I think only officers could be. And I think that had recently changed too, right? From pilots to any officer, correct? Because it was before it was only pilots, I thought. You know, the facts.
Well, since I was the fire support guy in there, and we got, you know, they just sent us some air on station, and they were AC-130 Air Force AC-130s. I had the most experience because I'd done SEAD missions. I had talked to air before and stuff, and done it a lot. So Naval Gunfire and stuff. So they just kind of gave me the air support and let me handle it. And it's trial by fire. Your training just comes in, and you don't really think about it. You reflect afterwards, like that was some crazy ass shit.
Yeah.
So yeah, back then they didn't even call. I want to say I was one of the first people to go through JTAC school. They called everyone FACS back then.
Yeah.
And only officers and pilots went to FACS school. And I was one of the first classes to go through where they actually called us JTACs. I remember them saying that. And then I had a foreign officer. I had an Italian Marine that went through with me, and we were the lone lieutenants. Everyone else was a captain through JTAC school.
Oh, okay, that's cool. So while you were in Mosul and all this fighting's happening, were you getting updates of how the war was going? Like, or were you only focused on what was happening right there around you? Like, how bad was it in Mosul at that point? Was it constant fighting, or was there like, okay, the initial fighting kind of quelled it a little bit, now we're good? And you know, how was the war going for you? And were you getting updates from the rest of the battle space in Iraq?
You know, as a lieutenant and as the fire support guy and the FIST team leader and the weapons platoon commander, I had a lot on my plate. Yeah. I was like checking out, making sure my assault men were in the right spot, making my machine gunners had enough stuff, you know, enough supplies, making sure they were in the right positions, making sure my FIST team was up. And so, I didn't have time to really get updates. My company commander was focusing on that. I honestly say I was in the dark because all I knew is we were surrounded. Yeah. We were like in the Bath Party headquarters. And the good guys were, you know, 6 clicks at the airfield, and we were at a skyscraper building holding it down. And I was like, I just got to focus on this right here. I remember there was a bank across the street, and someone had blown it up, and Iraqis were just looting the fuck out of that all day, just stealing all this Iraqi money. I got some dollar bills up on my wall from it. They were just pillaging this money that was useless. I remember just watching people just pillage this. They were setting it on fire and stuff. But my focus was on that moment. I didn't get a lot of intel. We were just like, hey, we took fire. We're trying to hold this position, and we kept getting intel that like, oh, that they're surrounding you guys. That's why we were getting air support. The air support could see through, you know, their FLIR systems and stuff. Like they're moving. Our snipers and our patrols were taking, you know, patrols out, but every time they took patrols out, they got pretty inundated because they took fire from 360. You're in a mount operation, so they just came back. And I think the battalion knew that after a couple of days that we were just like really risky out there, and they weren't going to reinforce this position, and that the airfield was a more tentative position. So they're like, hey, we actually got a call in the middle of the night that we were basically surrounded. The air that was up in the air, the spooky Spectre gunship said, you guys are surrounded. And so I'm like, oh shit, we're going to have to fight our way out of this. So the battalion sent in their CAT team to come get us. So that was our focus, is to get out of there. The CAT team came in the next day, and we E&E'd back to the airfield and took a little bit of fire and stuff. I mean, that was the biggest and culminating event of my career at the time, and it was really crazy, not realizing what was to come in my future. But that was our focus. It was just being a platoon commander, a fire support team leader. I remember at the Bath Party headquarters, a funny story is I slept in a pile of shit all night. I woke up in the morning in my flak jacket. I could smell shit all night. I didn't know why I could smell shit. And then my scout observer in the morning, Corporal Burkhalter, sir, you got a turd on your back. And I'm like, what? He gets his cable out and he scrapes the shit off my flak jack. And I could smell it. Someone in that bath party headquarters, it was ransacked before we got there, had taken a shit, but it was dark and I was on top of a building just trying to coordinate fires in there and stuff. And I had wondered, how come I smell shit everywhere? And it's because I slept in when I say slept, I kind of just laid there. I didn't really sleep.
Yeah.
But I remember weird stuff like that. I remember coming back to the city and seeing like the open air meat market with cow heads chopped off and blood everywhere. And the thing is this is the beginning of the war, and we're going through like a city that's like New York, basically their metropolitan area, and they just see these Marines come flying through, and they're just like they're not used to seeing American forces at this time. So speed was your security. The CAT team came in, grabbed us, and we just went back to the airfield because it was tenable, and then we started conducting patrols from there.
Did you have any like interactions with the locals there that were positive? Like they were glad you were there, or was that a lot of like, I mean, different areas of Iraq are going to have, because of their ethnic makeups and their religious backgrounds and stuff like that, are going to have different feelings towards like this whole, thing. Because some of them hated Saddam, some of them loved Saddam. So in this area, did you feel like you were getting more of the hate for you guys than, the love of, coming in and freeing them, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, from Saddam's dictatorship?
During this time, and I don't know if I'm saying it right, the Peshmerga, the Turkish had really infiltrated that area pretty good, and they were happy to have the Americans in that area, and they were helping us out. So we had a lot better take. We still had the patrols that would come and probe our positions, and we would go out and do patrols from the airfield into Mosul. But we were so light as an infantry battalion that we couldn't really affect much. We just wanted to disrupt, so that 10th Corps, they were worried about them getting uniformed up, getting their mechanized stuff, and then reinforcing from the north, Baghdad and all that stuff. So we were just kind of trying to disrupt them. And the Peshmerga that were with us, they had really done good. So they were happy we were there. And the Peshmerga, if you understand, they are part of Iraq that, if you remember in the 80s and 90s, that Iraq like gas. He used mustard gas and sarin gas. He just totally tried to destroy this smaller sect of religion. So they were happy we were there, and they were happy we were helping them. And a lot of those guys are the guys that we kind of left high and dry in Syria. We pulled out recently.
Yeah.
Those are the guys that they were real happy that we were there to help them, because their entire lives, all they did is get like wiped out. Anytime Saddam's forces come in, they get wiped out. But the conversely of that, the Turks hate them too. So they're in northern Iraq. So they're getting hit by the Turks. They're getting hit by Iraqis. And then also if they try to go towards the border of Iran, they're getting messed up. So we were lucky. Those guys came in and helped us out a lot. So I felt like they were like, hey, I'm so glad you guys are here helping us out. And I'd say it was a typical combat tour, if you want to say it. It felt like a good combat tour. We had one of our 81s platoon, because we didn't have enough infantry platoon guys we had to surround the airfield. So the mortarmen were being straight leg infantry guys and doing mortar. So we had our mortarmen get attacked, and we had a couple guys get injured, but no one died on that tour. No like major casualties. It was like, hey, we went to war, we kicked some ass, we took over. And then after we were there securing it, 173rd Army Mechanized Battalion, I think it was, or regiment came in. And man, when they came in with Bradleys, and they came in with Apaches and tanks and Abrams, and they're like, hey, we're going to link up with your guys' platoon. Where's it at? And I was just stuck on my arms and like, I have this 300 frontage. They're like, where are your guys at? And I'm like, each of them are about 100 yards apart. I'm like, what? So they were wondering how we were holding this airfield, because they were on top of each other with tanks and mechanized vehicles. They just, the Army, the big green machine, they came in heavy, and I was actually glad to have them. I'm like, okay, cool. We got some ass.
Thank God.
Yeah.
I feel a little better about our situation now. Feel a little bit more secure when you got some armor cruising around. Yeah, man, that would have been an interesting time, like taking part. What's your feelings on that? Like you're one of the people now written in history that have taken part in an invasion of another country. You know what I'm saying? Like, does that weigh on you at all, or how do you look at that in retrospect? Is it a positive thing for you, or because some people look at it now because of some of the situations, how things have turned in Iraq and Afghanistan both, where they kind of, maybe the service doesn't feel as good as it did when they did it. How do you take How do you look upon that, being one of those people in history now that have successfully gone into another country and conquered it?
I guess I'd have to ask, are you asking how I felt after that tour or
Yeah, yeah,
after my
yeah. Let's talk about
successive
just
tours?
well, I'd like to know how you felt then, and how has that feeling changed at all now over the years?
It's very different then compared to now.
Okay.
And the reason why then that felt like we went, when we were in the MEU and we're cutting gator squares in the med, gator squares, for those that don't know, we're just doing squares in
Doing
the ocean
circles,
on
yeah.
the arc in circles. We're just wanting to get in the fight. We're hearing people are offloading. We're thinking we're going to get left out. We're not going to get to go to war. And here we are just chomping at the bit to go. And then we finally got in. We went and secured Mosul and the Ba'ath Party headquarters. We didn't really take it. We had a couple people get Purple Hearts, like I said, in the 81st platoon. I remember that. But no one in my platoon, no one in my company got shot, blown up, or injured. IEDs, I don't even think were a thing then. And we were pretty happy about what we had done and what we accomplished. Then the MEU wasn't a main effort. The MEU said, "Hey, we got another mission. We're going to Liberia." So we've got Army came in, backed up Mosul. So we got in, we fought, and we left. It was like, I don't know if you could have a better circuit, and no casualties. So we went in, we kicked some ass, and we left. I'm like, okay, fuck it, we're gonna go to the next mission and kick some ass there too. So we were on cloud nine, riding high, until I started on the MEU getting information like one of the RD lieutenants, Lieutenant Picorni, he was like 6'6". He's the first officer killed in the Iraq War. We went to Naval Gunfire training at Vieques together, and I got told that, like, hey, he got killed by a mortar of all things. And I started, and the reality started sinking in that, oh shit, people are. I don't think you think about death and war. You just think about, I'm going to go in there, kick some ass, and no one's going to fuck with me because I'm indestructible. And then the realities of war started kicking in, but it wasn't heavy set. I was like, we still did a good thing. Now we went to Liberia. Let's do another good thing. And I felt like all of us felt proud of the moment and felt good about what we accomplished. Like I think we got everything we did. We did a MEU, we worked up, we got on the ARG, we won over, we offloaded, we fought, we did a couple humanitarian missions, we came back to Liberia, did some more operations and real world missions, and we came back, and I started thinking back later years, like, man, I got to do so much. And we were on the second longest MEU of all time. We spent like 9 months on ship. I think I have more ship time than most Navy guys. We spent 130 days on ship straight. Ugh. Which sucks. I wanted to go to Camp Lejeune, being a West Coast guy. I wanted to go to Camp Lejeune to do a med float, to do all the ports. I wanted to do Italy and Palma, Malta, Spain. I got a few of those. I got Italy and Portugal and stuff like that. But all of our ports got wiped out because we went to the war.
Yeah.
And they kept talking a good talk. Oh, we're going to go to France, or we're going to go here, and then it got wiped out and we went to war. So I didn't get the ports on the med float, but I got the war. So yeah, I got the combat experience.
How long were you guys in Mosul before you got pulled out?
Only a couple of weeks. I have to look at some of my citations. I didn't look up all that stuff.
Oh, that's okay.
But we were only there a couple of weeks. We offloaded. I would say we were there less than a month.
That's kind of crazy that you guys were only there for a little bit of time, and then you got pulled out to go to Liberia. Like, there's this whole war is going on, and it's still like we're still dealing with it, 17 years later. But at the time, they pulled you out to go do a different mission. To me, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what you guys, like the real world stuff you guys did in Liberia, but
the whole war kind of they just snowballed over everything in some ways, and they felt like they secured the country. And when the Army rolled into Mosul, they just felt like they had enough ass there, and the whole MEU never made it in. I know a lot of the arty guys, the battery guys, were upset because not one of the 310 Lima battery guys got to go into, except for the observers that were with us, got to go into fight the fight. They all got stuck in Greece and never got over there. Mm-hmm. They got in the fight in Liberia. The battalion commander felt bad, so he let them actually act as a provisional rifle company and actually let the battery go in first in Liberia, because they felt like they kind of got left out. So they did get some real world missions. But yeah, we got pulled out, go to Liberia, and we did our stuff in Liberia. Then we went back home and went and went back to Camp Lejeune, and everything was a flash. I mean, it was the second longest MEU of all time at the time. I think the only other MEU that was longer was the very first MEU that went to Afghanistan. And because I think they were 10 or 11 months just waiting to go in. And then there was us.
Yeah.
And so I think everything that we did, every Marine felt real proud. Like, man, we got to go do everything that the posters show, and everybody got to come home and be better because of it.
Yeah, man. I get what you're saying there.
But my time there versus time later did change. But that time, I think everyone was on cloud nine, feeling really good about stuff.
Yeah, I think a lot of guys that have changed, their perspectives have changed. A lot of it is, well, you get older, you get a little wiser. You start thinking about what's important and stuff like that, and you realize some of the stupid stuff you did when you were younger isn't really that important.
Yeah.
And then the other thing too is you start to see how, as these wars go on and on and on, it starts to become political, and decisions are made not because of smart tactics or anything like that. It's because it's a political decision rather than like a real world, like, this is smart and this will get the war over sooner. And it becomes frustrating because the people making those decisions aren't the ones that are down there dealing with the effects of it and stuff like that. And guys like you and thousands of other people know those effects, because you are on the pointy end of the stick, actually down there pulling the trigger. And, the real world implications of some of the bad decisions that were made on the political side have, ended with people dying, people being injured, and just, people with a bad taste in their mouth over their time in the service and stuff like that. So I'm always interested to get people's perspective about, that wide-eyed, innocence before you go compared to like afterwards, and, kind of how your thought process changes and stuff like that. So I appreciate you giving that. When you come back, what was it like coming back? Coming back from the MEU. Oh, well, first off, have you ever seen that documentary? I've asked a couple people this. Have you ever seen the documentary Severe Clear?
No.
It's an artillery officer, and I feel like if anyone would have known, it would have been you, because you were on the MEU at the same time. It's an 0802 who's on the MEU, not your MEU obviously, but he's on the MEU and goes in to do the invasion with another unit, and he's either with LAV or Trax, and it's like him with a camcorder just recording the invasion and some of the stuff that he did, and running multiple fire missions at the same time. And it's actually a pretty graphic documentary too. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but the first 30 minutes are this like boot lieutenant talking about, like, this is my gas mask. It's called Severe Clear, SEVERECLEAR. It was on Netflix a long time ago. I'm not sure if it is anymore or not, but yeah, check it out. It's pretty interesting to watch because it shows like a really unfiltered view of the life of an 0802 during an invasion. Like, he's standing up in the back of an LAV, yelling down to a scout, like, hey, here's the fire mission, and the scout, the part I always remember is the scout looking up with like two handsets in his hands, like, I'm running 2 missions right now, sir. Like, give me just a second, but, I didn't know if you had seen that or not, but it's pretty interesting. Check it out. You might actually know the lieutenant because he's he was the same time frame as you and everything.
Yeah.
Now, when you got back from this deployment, what was it like coming home, like getting off ship, being back and being like, okay, now I'm back. The war for me is over now, but seeing it on TV still. How did that feel for you?
Man, so we got back, we got done with Liberia. We did our wash down in Rota, Spain. When we were in Rota, Spain, I started thinking about, well, what the heck am I going to do when I get back? Because I had no MOS credibility as an 0802. Yeah. And I was like, I have no MOS credibility. I have none of that. And I'm going to go into an artillery. I hadn't taken, if people don't know this, as artillery officers, we have to take a test every year on gunnery information.
The safety.
The safety test. Yeah. And like, I hadn't done gunnery in years, because we were fighting a war. So I was like, what am I going to do? How am I going to do? So I started talking to my infantry company commander, Captain Clark at the time. I think he's Colonel or almost General Clark by now. And he's like, hey, Dan, I think you should go over to Recon because, I think you should try out for Recon. So in Rota, I took the Recon Indoc in Rota in Spain. I did the Recon Indoc in Rota because they allow it when you're on the MEU before you come back to Lejeune. Recon gets together, they run an Indoc, and then you can get into RIP, Recon Indoctrination Platoon, when you get back, and then hopefully you make it through all the selection process and you make it in. So I did the Recon Indoc in Spain on the MEU. I have a very cliche story. I was a young married lieutenant at the time, no kids, nothing, but I was married. My wife left me when I was in war. So my wife came back to my house. I had officer housing in Lejeune. She wiped out my whole house, took all my stuff,
Oh my
went
gosh.
back to went back to California. So I showed up to an empty house. My parents wanted to come out and see me and like be there for me, but I'm like, nope, I'm not. I'll come out to California. I'll get leave. I'll see you.
Hmm.
So I showed up and everyone's families come running towards them from the Mew, and everyone's there. And I just literally walking past them. I get in my truck. My truck that was parked in the battalion, the handle was broken to get in the truck, so I had to jimmy rig it to get home. And then I just remember going home and sleeping in a vacant house that night with my dog. I told her to leave my dogs, so my dogs were in a kennel. So I went and got my dogs out of a kennel, and I slept on the floor in officer housing my first night home. And I remember, man, this fucking sucks.
That's
And
depressing, man.
here I do. I come home from war, and no one. I just remember, like out of a movie, everybody's family runs past them and runs to them, and I just kept walking. I
Yeah.
just kept walking to my truck. So I did that. Came back. I didn't really feel like I had a place to fit in because I took the recon indoc, but the battalion commander, Colonel Hogue, was thinking, you have a secondary MOS as an O2 or O302. I'm going to make you my 81's platoon commander. And I was all about it. I'm like, cool, I'm going to be an 81's platoon commander. The artillery battery was like, the fuck if you are.
Like, what are you talking about? You're an arty guy. Get back over here.
They were already pissed that I went to IOC without asking,
Oh, really?
thinking that I was a heretic and I had left the arty community. Because anyone that knows about arty, king of battle,
You
they
left
thump
the
their chest.
king.
Oh yeah. So they were like, you're not going to fucking be 81s. So I couldn't do that. But when I was in the infantry battalion and infantry company, I also had a secondary MOS as the intel officer for my company. So I did, every time we went out and did missions during that time, Liberia, Iraq, Mosul, me and my team did sensitive site exploitation
Hmm.
for the intel shop. So when I came back, the war, they had a lot of over MOSs. And all the combat arms MOSs are the over ones. Artillery, mainly artillery and infantry, they plussed up a lot of those MOSs, and they were over. And they were short in 3 MOSs: adjutant, comm, and intel. So during that time, I was like, my battery commander kind of got mad at me because I didn't hang out with the battery all that time during that time.
Hmm.
And I went to IOC without asking him, he thought. And then I wanted to stay in the infantry and be the 81st platoon commander. So he was like, he was trying to screw me a little bit. I'd already done the recon indoc and was going to most likely go to recon. He's like, nope, you're going to Haiti on a special debt. Haiti, something kicked off in Haiti. He's like, you're going to Haiti. And I'm like, sir, you know I'm going to recon. Nope, you're going to Haiti. So I
Haters.
put this package in to lat move to intel because I'm like, hey, I was the intel officer, but you had to roll the crap dice on the table and maybe crap out and get comm or adjutant. And we had some other infantry officers in the battalion that wanted to go intel too, because remember, intel is this sexy job that
Hmm.
everyone thinks is like James Bond. So I put my package in, and a couple of months later, we all get our MOSs back, and 2 of the infantry officers from my battalion, one got comm, one went from infantry to adjutant, and I got intel.
Oh,
So
man.
I literally, I was an 0802. I had a secondary MOS as an 0302, and now they made me an 0203. They made because of my infantry background and my combat experience, they made me a ground intelligence officer. No MOS school. They just said, hey, because we're short in this MOS, you are now an 0203, or an 0203. And so I had that MOS. So I told the battery, hey, I'm an 0203, and they couldn't legitimately keep me in the battery. And I did the indoc. And that's when I made my way over to recon.
That's
I
awesome,
kind of
dude.
I had to risk burning some bridges in the artillery community because I would have seen these guys again. And honestly, if I would have stayed in the Marine Corps, I made some people pissed off in artillery because they thought that I left them, that artillery wasn't good enough for them. And my take on it was, I have no MOS credibility as an artillery guy.
Yeah.
I never did the guns platoon. I never did the FDO spot. I knew fire support, but you can't spend your career in artillery fire support.
No.
My MOS credibility was infantry and weapons, platoon commander. So I thought I'll go to, like I said, my whole goal was Anglico or recon. Anglico didn't have any openings at the time. There was no way for me to get to Anglico because I was like, I'll get to Anglico, but Anglico was shut. My door opening at that time was recon. So that's when I transitioned over to 2nd Recon Battalion.
What a crazy path you have taken. Like to go. I've never met. I've actually. I don't think
It sounds made up.
I think I know one or two officers that have had more than one MOS as an officer, and usually I think one of them was like a pilot that stopped being a pilot, was like, I'm done flying. And I don't know if he chose that or if the Marine Corps chose that, but then he became like, he went from that to being like a supply or an adjutant or something like that. Yeah. And so it's extremely rare to get a secondary MOS like that as an officer, and to pick up a third one and then like do an actual lat move. I mean, it's almost unheard of.
Uncommon. During that time, I had a friend I went to the basic school. He was a combat engineer officer, and I think it was 6 Marines. They were short on infantry officers. And I remember talking to him. He went over to 6 Marines as a combat engineer officer to be an infantry platoon commander, because they just, like I said, it was Vietnam era-esque. They didn't have enough infantry officers. He went over, and I talked to him. He didn't get to go to IOC, and he didn't get to stay in the infantry, but 6 Marines was low. And I remember talking to him. He's like, yeah, they're making me an infantry platoon commander. Just, hey, go over and take charge of this platoon. So, I mean, it's just that weird timing that we were in.
Yeah.
That those kind of things were happening. And so when I hear people talk about their stories, and almost when I talk about my background, it sounds extremely embellished. And this is the first time, besides with my peers, I've ever talked about my career progression, because to me it sounds made up, and people who are officers or gone in the Marine Corps, you're full of shit. That does net. Dude, you were RD, you're infantry, then you're recon. It sounds made up.
When you sent me the list of your MOSs and training and stuff, I'm like, at first I'm like, hold on, is this dude a liar? Like, is it? Yeah. I thought the same thing. I'm like, no one's ever. I'm like, Naval Gunfire. Now he's talking about being an infantry officer, being in recon, being an artillery officer. I'm like, that is bullshit. Like, this sounds like bullshit. But
it is straight bullshit. One of the other artillery officers that was in my battery before me, I told him I wanted to go recon. I digressed back to being a young lieutenant when I first got to the battery, and he was the FDO at the time of the battery, and I go, hey, Connolly, I still have some of his stuff. I go, hey, Lieutenant Connolly, I heard you want to go recon. He goes, shut the fuck up about that. Don't say you want to be recon here, because you'll be labeled as a heretic like I am. He actually, as an 0802, made it over to recon as well, and he went in as a reconnaissance officer, made it over, and went out on a MEU as a reconnaissance platoon commander. And then he came back and went to the drill field down over at MCRD San Diego. But I mean, for me during that time, I probably got a handful of other friends that have those experiences where they went different places. I just think the war created this weird timing for all of us, that we just, we landed in these jobs. There was another major, when I had base housing, they separate base housing by company grade officers and field grade officers. And I ran into a major who was an arty guy, and he went through infantry officers course and lat moved over to infantry. He was like a white unicorn. Never heard of this. And I found him, and the way he did it was a general officer apparently can say, hey, they can sign off and say, you're going to go from artillery to infantry. And I talked to him, and he's like, yeah, that's not happening. We're in war. You want to go from an over MOS to an over MOS. It's never going to happen. So I did the next best thing. I went to a short MOS, but I could have landed in comm or adjutant as well. I just
took that risk.
I had the intelligence officer for the infantry battalion wrote me a really good letter. The battalion commander Colonel Hogue, who wanted me to stay as the 81st platoon commander, wrote me a great recommendation letter, because you had to get them for your package. And then my company commander, Captain Clark, wrote me a great recommendation. I think those really helped out so that I landed into the intelligence field so that I could go over to recon.
I think this really reinforces the point I've made, or 2 points I've made a lot on the show. One is, life's a lot easier if you're not an asshole. Like, if you're a good dude and you just learn your job and you become a positive person in your unit and someone that people can count on, people are more likely to help you out, get the things that you want to get. To a point, obviously.
Yeah.
But to get these letters of recommendation and stuff like that, they're not going to write a letter for someone that they don't think is actually capable, stuff like that. The second point is, take your own career into your own hands, have a say. Like, don't just drift in the sea of whatever and wait for someone to tell you what you're going to be doing. Put yourself out there, request orders, request a job, request a specific billet. And then if you have to burn some bridges to get it done, then maybe that's what you have to do, but you need to understand what you're doing. You know, you got to understand that the path that you're taking.
Prior enlisted me really understood that. I know being prior enlisted and coming from a non-combat arms background, I knew exactly what I wanted, and I was willing to burn a bridge to get to where I wanted, because I tell people that no one looks out for your career like you.
Exactly.
Not the monitors. If people don't understand what monitors are that direct officers' careers, the monitor doesn't give a shit. The recruiters don't give a shit. No one takes hold of your career like you. So I knew for me to go to the places I wanted to go wasn't a normal career path. And I didn't care if I got out of the Marine Corps as a lieutenant or as a captain if I went the direction that I wanted. All I knew is this is the direction I want. And I'm going to say this. I had way more people tell me, no, it wasn't going to happen than yes, it's going to happen. But I just was like, okay, if you tell me no, I'm going to find another way. And I tell people that all the time, if you want what you want, you're going to have to break some eggs to make an omelet, so to speak. And and that's what I did. I was willing. I knew the stuff I was doing was going to piss off the artillery community. I knew that.
Yeah.
I didn't care, because I was like, me and my battery commander got into it. He was chastising me and yelling at me when he was going to send me to Haiti. And I just sat there like a bump on a log. And we have this another movie moment where he's like, you're not saying anything. I'm like, well, I'm not supposed to. I'm a lieutenant. And no, speak freely. And I'm like, no, sir, that's a trap waiting to happen. I know better than to that. It was just me and him in the office, no one else there. And I'm like, well, you really want me to say what I want to say? And I just told him, you've treated me like a second-rate citizen my entire career here. You're mad at me because of this and that. And I don't know if I look like a kid who beat you up in high school or you got something else against me. I go, but this is horseshit. I did the screening for Recon. I'm able to go over. I have no MS credibility as an 0802. I'm trying to do what's best for my career, and you're trying to throw up a roadblock, and I don't agree with it.
Yeah, it's hard for people.
And he was pissed about that, but I had it. Like I said, you got to take hold of your career, and if sometimes you just got to burn a bridge to get where you want.
Yeah, it's hard for people to understand too that may not be in that world or understand that realm, but. You know, as an artillery officer, like what you're talking about, that MOS credibility, if you don't have time with guns platoon, if you don't have time as an FDO, you're not going to get a command. You're not going to progress. Like the thought that you're going to be able to make a full 20-year career and, you know, get put in the key leadership positions, it's just not going to happen. So, I mean,
that was my goal, was to be in command. I knew I'd never have command as an artiillery guy. All my background was infantry.
Yeah.
So
no, it makes sense. I completely understand you wanting to make that switch then. I want to get into your recon stuff, and I want to get into, you were in Fallujah and stuff like that as well, but I want to save that for a separate podcast. We're at almost 2.5 hours. So I'd hate for that stuff to get lost because people aren't going to listen that far into it. But before I let you go, I do want to ask one question that I've always wondered. You know, you were on the MEU, you go into Iraq, you guys do your thing, then you get recalled back to the ship. When I was on ship, you know, the Navy people and the Marines, we didn't really get along very well. There were some that did, but for the enlisted guys at least, there was a lot of, you know, animosity and stuff because, one, the Navy people, all the sailors, they didn't like, you know, the 1,000 Marines that just got stationed on their LHD, making their chow lines long and shit like that. What was it like to come from a combat zone where you're like in legitimate combat? Like, people are getting killed out here. What was it like to come back from that back to the ship? Like, how were you looked upon by your Navy counterparts and stuff like that? I feel like that would have been a weird, you know, like just coming back like, hey, I just got done fighting the war. What have you guys been up to? You know, like.
Yeah. Well, before we go on to that, I will say, if we ever get into it on a later podcast, all my JTAC time, the majority of my fire support and JTAC time is my recon time and Fallujah time. That is later on for your community. I know you got a lot of Anglico and fire support guys. That's the bulk and the meat and potatoes of my JTAC time. So I would like to talk about that at a later time with you.
For sure.
But the time coming back on the MEU, what people don't realize is because the ship supports the war going in, they actually got combat action ribbons because they supported the way the Navy works it. They supported a combat unit, and they did all the supporting elements to get us into combat. So they got cars, they got combat action ribbons.
What?
For sending their ship. Because they sent us in, they supported us to go in. So they actually, because the ships get ribbons too. You never see that. So the ship, they painted their combat action ribbon on the ship, and they supported us coming in. But there was no animosity. I would say we called it the blue-green team on our MEU was phenomenal. And I'll say this because I was on a smaller smaller ship. I was on an LPD,
Okay.
the USS Nashville. And so I wasn't on the Death Star, the LHA, where you had meeting after meeting. So we were on a smaller deck. Most of our officers on our Navy ship were LDOs, so limited duty officers. So they were prior enlisted that became commissioned naval officers. So they already had that prior enlisted experience. Our Navy captain was an F-18 pilot, and he was good to go. Even before the war, when we did workup missions, like we did some missions where we'd go off and do stuff, we'd show up in the middle of the night. The captain would be on the lower V. It'd be 0 dark 30, 2:30 in the morning. He'd be up, hey, we got hot chow in the chow hall for you guys, ready to go. Our Navy guys, we had a really good working relationship. When we went on Libo and ports, we had some of the Navy officers that we went out with. I don't necessarily know if it was completely like that on the enlisted side, because Marines stick with Marines. But we had a very good blue-green team from the MEU to the battalion. I think it's because we were on a smaller ship.
Yeah.
And we were integrated and much closer. It wasn't like being in a large... An LHA is like an aircraft carrier.
Yeah, I was on the LHD for both of my MEUs, so that's what I dealt with.
So those places, as an officer, I would have spent meeting after meeting, and I would have never got... But on the smaller deck, I did Marine Corps martial arts with my Marines, fighting down in the lower V. We started doing standard operating procedures using the game Halo on Xbox.
Oh, really?
We got link cables in the officer staterooms. We had 4 TVs. We put one team on one side, one team on the other, and we would go through Halo doing our standard operating procedures, how we would patrol and how we would bound and overwatch and go through buildings. I mean,
That's hilarious.
We had a great time. We read books, we played video games, we ate, and we worked out. I mean, the blue-green team with the Navy, they were great. We did fantail firings where we had, like a rifle range set up on the fantail. We just had a really good experience. I would say my MEU time was really good.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, it's just I just had a bad experience with mine. Like, I got lucky on my first MEU, and we got off for 3 or 4 months, and I got to sit in Kuwait and do training there, which sit in Kuwait is way better than what I was doing cast 2 to 3 times a week with, Apaches and everything else. So that was great compared to being on ship. It was just, I always wondered, like, if we went to combat and people were getting killed and we come back, would any of these Navy people even care? And I'd say that, and I know some of them would, and I'm friends with some of the Navy people. Don't get me wrong that I'm not, but as an example, we had a kid, we had an Osprey go into the water while I was on the MEU, and one of the crew chiefs passed away. His I don't know if I think he got knocked out when they ditched. The 2 crew chiefs were told to ditch by the pilots, and I think he got knocked out, and his vest didn't inflate, and they were wearing full kit because this is at the beginning of OIR, and they were doing missions into Iraq. And the other crew chief held on to this kid as long as he could until it was basically going to drown him, and they had to let him go, and he passed away. And we had a memorial service on the deck of the ship, a week later or something, whenever we did it. And I just remember during the memorial service on the deck, on the catwalk behind us, we're all in formation and stuff like that. On the catwalk behind us, we could just hear these Navy guys just laughing and joking and stuff like that, like during this memorial service, during roll call and stuff like that. And actually ended up being a fight after the memorial service between some Marines and some Navy guys. And it was just like that kind of mentality and that kind of thought. People are just selfish in general, so I was always wondered what it would be like to go to an actual war. Like, hey, we're on ship, but no one, for us, we're like, are we actually going to go do anything? We're on the MEU. To what it would be like to actually come back from that, and then what the feeling on ship would be like would people look at you with holy shit, these guys just came back from the war, or was it just whatever, hey, welcome back, let's go get chow, kind of deal. So that's the only reason I even asked. It was it's just something I've never experienced or anything like that. So
I think we had a really good experience, and I've had some other peers that have came back and written books about their time and their experiences. And I'd say maybe it was just the era and the time, because it was the beginning of the war. So I think everybody just the war hadn't been going on for 20 years like it is now. So I think the level of respect and the severity and the importance of it was all new. And I think everybody was like, this isn't nothing to I think we've almost become complacent with the war.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's why maybe later, I mean, you're talking about kids who weren't born during the war or going to war now, so it's all they've ever known. Whereas my era of going to war, the last major conflict, if you count the Gulf War, was everyone talked about Vietnam or the Gulf War or Kosovo or Panama, Grenada. There was nothing really big.
Mm-hmm.
But then there was this gigantic war. So it was all new. Who knew it was going to last
This long.
this
Almost
long?
2 decades.
You know, and like I was never one of the guys. I always felt some ways I was an enlisted guy parading as an officer because I never got at night and wrote in my journal about the day that went on because I was going to write a book when I got back. I was just like, I was in it for the moment. And I knew people, I'd see people that like they were journaling so they could come back and write books and do different stuff. That was never my take. I just wanted to be in the moment, doing it and living it.
Yeah, man. No, I get that. And I get that. And I totally appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. And for sure, 100%, we're going to set up a second interview to get the rest. Like I said, I don't want to start it now and then this end up being a 4-hour podcast and half the people shut it off at the 2-hour mark and not get to hear the rest of it. Because I think it'd be a disservice to your story and you know, and all that. So, again,
that's what happens. We get together and we could talk for days.
Oh, dude. That's why I started the podcast, man. I'm like, one, I just talk too much. And two, I'm lucky enough to know so many people that have done so many cool things. And through that, they know other people. And I meet people like you, you know, Asa put us in touch together so we could get this whole thing going. And it's just, you know, you're just another example of a guy. Like if I saw you walking down the street, I wouldn't think anything about it. I'd be like, whatever, some dude. But, you know, now there's probably people that know you that have never heard some of this stuff and are going to hear this and be like, holy shit, like I can't believe, I didn't realize that these were the things that were occurring. And I think that's the importance of one, not only sharing our stories, even if it's amongst ourselves, like even no one should hold their story to themselves. You should at least share it with your fellow, you know, veterans and stuff like that, because you need to let that stuff off your chest sometimes. But two, I'm glad you come on and talk about it because now it's recorded, man. It's in history. Yeah. People can now, if they ever wonder, like, what was the initial invasion like? Because no one talks about, you know, Mosul. No one talks about the MEU going into Mosul. This is the first I've ever had anyone really kind of detail it in you know, some kind of, you know, more intricate form. And now it's saved in history. And I think that's an important thing for, you know, not only the future generations of Americans to be able to hear, but, you know, specifically, I think it'll be great when you have grandkids or great grandkids and they're like, what great grandpa do in the war? Well, hey, he did a recording back in 2020, you know, let's listen to it. And, you know, you can't put a price on something like that. I just think it's important. So again, I appreciate you coming on the show. If you have any kind of organizations or your own social media or anything like that you'd like to promote, man, go ahead and, you know, you can throw it out there if you want to throw in something for any of those people.
You know, I got to say, like you talked about in the beginning, I'm kind of cynical. I don't really ever talk about my military career. I actually, because of my own PTSD, I don't get involved in a lot of stuff, and it's probably bad on me. My wife several years ago was like, when are you going to talk about your stuff? You never tell anybody. And I just didn't want to talk about it because we didn't get into the crazy stuff in Fallujah and the fire support stuff that's probably more interesting to your community with the Anglico guys. But those things weigh heavy on me. And so I just kind of keep it all in. So this is a great outlet for, you know, to talk about stuff that I don't know if I've ever talked about to anyone. You talk about my buddy Asa, who put you in contact with me, who is an Anglico guy. You know, I think the last time I talked about anything was when me and him got together on vacation in the Bahamas, and we hadn't seen each other for 10 years, and we sat down and had some drinks and drank and cried and had a bunch of fun times together. So it's a relief to be able to talk about your times because I don't ever want to sound like I'm embellishing, and I feel like my wife would get bored listening to me. And so this is a good outlet
for sure
for anyone to kind of get that stuff off their chest and to talk about it, because you say, you know, kind of if you want to talk about anyone you sponsors. I've actually been the opposite. I may be cliche where I don't do any vet functions. I don't get involved in anything. And for a long time, I even though I'm law enforcement, I got away from shooting and camping and anything that seemed Marine Corps-esque. I kind of withdrew away from it. I kind of wanted to push that side of me away. But there came a time where I decided I got to talk to someone about this stuff. And hopefully if any listeners that you have talk about it or hear this, understand that talking about it, who cares what anyone thinks or what they say? Just getting it off your chest allows you not to keep that negative in. I heard a good story or analogy, you know, keeping grudges or holding on to this stuff is like swallowing poison and expecting someone else to die. This is stuff inside of you kind of got to get out. So just talking about it and not getting in too much of the weeds with some of the really negative stuff maybe, but just getting it out and talking about it, it's very therapeutic. So I appreciate it. And it was a positive time. And I appreciate you having me, and I look forward to the next time.
For sure, man. For sure. And I hope, and you know, one thing that other guys have told me that talking about it, they were like, dude, so many things I started thinking about afterwards. It brought up so many memories that I hadn't, you know, like people's names or like things, you know, individual actions that they have done or training and stuff like. They're like, these are things I hadn't thought about in years, and like just doing the podcast kind of exercised that and brought it back out, made them think about it and stuff. So, and that's great, you know, because I think people's memories and their times of service and stuff like that should be remembered, and they should be able to hold on to that as long as they can. And yeah, man. So anyway, again, thanks for coming on. We'll set something up. We'll set up a later date. We'll figure out a good time for you to come back on, and we'll record at least one more, maybe two. You know, who knows?
Yeah.
You've been through so much. They may have time to have to do a couple. But for those, listening, check out my Instagram. It's at Former Action Guys and at J Kramer Graphics, both of those, and you can hit up my website jkramergraphics.com. And yeah, if there's nothing else, man, I hope you have a good Sunday, and hope the rest of your week is good.
Thanks, Justin. I look forward to seeing you next time, bud.
All right, bye.
Take care.